Good evening and welcome to the Mary Trump Show election night watch party. We're going to have as much fun as we possibly can before we can't anymore. Before I bring everybody in, I just want to say a couple things. First of all, I am bringing a class action lawsuit for pain and suffering against the New York Times for bringing back the fucking needle. So there's that. Secondly, I think Tiffany Cross never should have been let go. She should have been reinstated for many reasons, but tonight she should be reinstated because she was absolutely right. Florida is the dick of the country. Both Marco Rubio, who has got to be one of the most craven, ineffectual, spineless, despicable, all the adjectives, senators. So we have one against an extraordinary candidate in Val Demings. All I can say about that is I think Val Demings is just an amazing person and candidate. I don't want to be getting 10 emails a day from her anymore. So a slight upside there, but it's so bad for Florida and the country. And of course, Ron DeSantis didn't just win; he trounced his actually sane and not fascistic opponent, Charlie Crist. So, what do we expect though? It's Florida. Yeah. There is some good news in the early returns. Maryland has elected its first Black governor in Westmore. And I was going to say Maxwell because I don't remember his last name, but a Democrat actually won a congressional race in Florida.
Maxwell Frost.
Thank you, Maxwell Frost. And he's like 12, which is even more exciting. And Massachusetts and Maura Healey elected its first lesbian governor. And both of those are pickups. So that's excellent. Okay, so thank you everybody for being here. Mostly it's just for my emotional and psychological well-being. But
I just didn't have time to make a martini. I had to teach class tonight.
There will be time, I'm sure, and it will become probably necessary at some point. Yeah. So I want to kind of kick off by asking each of you, what races are you most looking at? I mean, I know the answer could be all of them, of course, but whether in terms of their prognostication value, or I don't even know if that's a word. I'm very tired already. Or just because, like, for me, it's the governor of New York, because Kathy Hochul is a good candidate and should win by a landslide, but New York is terrible at both picking mayor. New York City's terrible at picking mayors, and New York State can be terrible at picking governors. And her opponent, Lee Zeldin, is an election denier, and he's against abortion of all kinds. He's pro putting guns in the hands of everybody, including insane, violent people. And if Donald is ever convicted of state crimes, Lee Zeldin will pardon him. So that matters to me. And also, I think New York is one of our biggest states, and it matters who's running it. So that's one question. And then, part of what I want to do tonight is sort of make the case that no matter what happens in this election, the Democrats have to have the Democratic strategy going forward will be exactly the same. The only thing that will be different is our emotional well-being. So, 2 years more, either way, we have to fight as hard as we can, because we need to stop this every 2-year cycle of just living in absolute terror that our democracy is going to go away, and it looks like it may well. So, Mara, I want to start with you because we don't have you for that long, and I'm just so grateful that you could be here. So, what are you thinking?
I'm so happy to be here with you guys, despite the fact that elections used to be, as a politics junkie and an American, a source of joy, and It was fun. remember when this was fun and you would get together with friends in person and, win, lose, you didn't feel like the world was going to end.
Yeah.
So that's hard to take. We're all exhausted by years of Donald Trump and pandemic and everything else. I'm looking at New York as well. I think it's disturbing to me. Part of the reason that the race is so important to watch and has national implications is because I think there's this realization among New Yorkers that the same kind of Republicanism and Trumpism that has been seen across the country is actually happening here. Because New York has a really long tradition of moderate Republicanism, and that's not who Lee Zeldin is. And I think more than anything, that is the surprise, not so much that there's a competitive Republican, that's certainly of interest, but more just that he is who he is, and he portrays himself to be moderate, but really it's not in any shape or form. And then I think beyond that, I'm very interested in the race in Georgia, not just because I think Raphael Warnock is somebody who Americans really need to see return to Congress, but also because I think it might tell us something about how the Republican playbook is working or not against the Democratic base, and how motivated Black voters are or not to show up at the polls in despite just the exhaustion, and Democrats in general. And also, finally, I'm looking at Michigan. Because the ballot initiative there, obviously there's a very important race for Governor Gretchen Whitmer. We don't talk about this enough. Militias tried to kidnap her and do her grievous harm. And yet she's saved a lot of lives over the years with COVID protocols that were unpopular. She's really an impressive figure in that light. And so then you have a ballot initiative to enshrine some protections for abortion in the law there. And that's a really important swing state. I think that's going to be really telling us something, too, about the strength and the resilience, really, of Democratic voters. That's what I'm looking at, is the resilience of Democratic voters. They're exhausted. Do they continue? Are they also showing up, or are they just exhausted and staying home?
Yeah, Rachel Vindman is in the house. So good to see you. And I know you're. It's really late where you're in Britain. So
I'm just typing it. Yeah, I look a little like I just woke up because I did. We both did. We just woke up to like look at the races. So
oh my God,
I saw Florida's a loss, but
Florida. So Rachel, I just wanted to catch up on where we're starting, and I want to go to you next simply because it's like 5, 2 or 3 in the morning where you are. And if you want to go back to sleep, if you can, now that you've terrified yourself. Basically, I just want to sort of set the table tonight by asking everybody what 1 or 2 races you're most looking at. And I don't know, any general thoughts you have. Mara just said, and we've sort of been commiserating with this idea that watching elections results returns is no longer this fun communal activity. It's sort of like everybody just trying to comfort each other and keeping us all from spinning out, because the results I did not have this experience in 2016 because I didn't think what happened was going to happen. But certainly in 2020, the problem leading up to that, and it's similar this year, is that the results are so diametrically opposite that you can't even imagine what your life is going to be. So what are you thinking?
The races that I am most concerned about or most watching, I think one is my representative race, Virginia 7, Abigail Spanberger and Nestle Vega. Big one for us. And gosh, I don't know, some of the governorships, just, personal. The person I would most like to lose, if I had to pick, it's very personal to me, is Ron Johnson. But
interesting. Yeah.
It's just personal.
Yeah,
so,
of course. Well, it's personal, but it's also American.
Right? He is a horrible person and horrible for the United States. I mean, it would be interesting to see if there's an appetite for the race that Mandela Barnes ran, I mean, for the campaign that he ran, to see if that's winnable, because that's an important benchmark. But I'm not too upset about Florida. Just woke up, saw a lot about Florida, and I'm like, I mean, what do we expect? Like, you have to keep realistic expectations, I think. And
Absolutely.
I don't know. What do you think, Alex? What are the ones you're watching the most?
We're getting voiceover work.
Wait,
Alex Vindman.
Is Alex like under the covers, like trying to sleep?
Fortunately,
Excuse me, Lieutenant Colonel Mr. Pillow over there.
Oh my God.
We have kind of a big room here. What are the races that you?
I think the ones that are most meaningful from a strategic standpoint are the Senate races and keeping control of the Senate.
Yeah.
So that there is maybe some check on the worst instincts of the MAGA Republican Party if they take control of the House. So I think Georgia is going to be critical. Warnock against Herschel Walker. That's a kind of a litmus test for how bad we're doing as a country.
That's true.
If Herschel Walker wins, then I mean, that's deeply, deeply troubling as a barometer. Arizona is big in the same regard.
Mm-hmm.
I think Pennsylvania is another big one. I guess these are the ones that you'd probably hear if you flip on a channel. Nevada and next in the order. Those are the ones that are particularly interesting, and then a whole host of House races. I think if Abigail Spanberger loses in our area, she's a moderate. I think it would mean that there's basically a straight kind of party line vote in a lot of the country.
Yeah.
For Republicans, and we are in for a very, very difficult Congress in the next couple of years.
Yeah.
If she wins, then I think the margins the Republicans still have a good chance of taking it, but it'll be through razor thin margins and maybe some sort of check on the Republicans there also.
Yeah, and I it's still too early to call anything, but Elena Luria is behind. By 11 points at this. There's again still plenty of votes, and who knows where the votes are coming from. Spanberger is behind by 2 or 3, but again, same caveat. But still, it's
upshot. Doe has it lean Dem for whatever reason. They have Abigail as lean Dem.
I'll take it.
Yeah, I mean.
I think,
me too.
Whatever you can say to make me feel better. That's really why we're here.
So I don't know when does Virginia count the early vote?
I don't know if I know enough about
that. Yeah, we voted. Virginia has the voting since like the end of September. We voted very early, so yeah. I mean, I think there's going to be some we win and some we lose. There's going to be some surprises. I don't think it's going to be a red wave, and I think that's important. Like we got to take the wins where we get the wins, and it's going to be really important that we amplify that tomorrow.
Yeah.
It starts tomorrow, doesn't it? I mean,
it definitely starts tomorrow. Whenever we get all of the results, but
I'm starting now. I
think we should start. Well,
I feel I have
Let's wait.
I'm not waiting. I'm
sorry. I mean, no, but the reason.
I feel optimistic about the long term because I think.
Okay. Well,
what you were saying, Mary, earlier, which is no matter what happens, we have to figure out. Sorry to step on your conversation, but I think we have to. You're used to me, but I think we need to move forward in a way with our party because it's our parties, or where I don't want to be spammed by 500 emails asking me for money.
Oh my gosh.
I want to be organizing in my communities all year round around shared values, and it has to look a lot different. We have to be everywhere, school boards everywhere all the time participating. Anyway, but that. And so I'm starting now, and I'm optimistic that if we all leave the bird site and free up several hours of our day doing other things, that will be better for democracy than what it's looked like so far.
Amen to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a conversation for another time, and I have sort of mixed feelings about that. I think if Twitter were in the right hands, that it becomes a completely different story, but it's not. And I think what everybody said so far about the raises they're looking at, why it matters, just sort of underscores the point that no matter what, the fight is going to be the same going forward. Obviously, the urgency will increase a little. Well, I don't even know if that's true. You know what? Not the urgency, because the urgency needs to be up here, even if the Democrats had a blue wave, right? Because of how the Republicans are winning with candidates like Rubio against Demings, or even putting up candidates like a Carrie Lake or a Herschel Walker. So Jennifer Rubin, I think the urgency has to be the same. The difference is if we end up with, and I'm so sorry I'm saying this because I know it's traumatizing. If we end up with a Senator Herschel Walker, and a Senator, what's his name, Oz, or even worse, Vance.
That sounds made up. Senator Oz,
right?
Sounds like a joke.
Well, let's make sure it is.
And it is.
Let's make it theoretical forever. But Jennifer, it's that should make it even more clear to Democrats that the rules have to change. The rules by which we fight have to change completely.
Let me take a step back and excuse my slightly hoarse voice.
No, there's no reason to apologize for that voice. It's awesome.
Oh, there you go. Yes, it used to be in the good old days, which was like 2000 or 1996, that there was a Republican and a Democrat. You preferred one, but you did not feel like the country was at risk if your candidate lost. That is no longer the case. And it is somewhat upsetting because democracy does not allow itself to function if you elect a bunch of Herschel Walkers and Oz's. There is something about civic virtue that is essential both in the votership, in the electorate, and in the elected people. It cannot function if we are going to treat this like a really, really scary, bad reality show. And how to communicate to Americans that they have to be more serious. And at this point, I'm not even sure Trump is the biggest problem. I'm not even sure Terry Lake is the biggest problem. I think the voters are the biggest problem. And we have to figure out how to not only mobilize those people who understand the stakes, but figure out how to slowly crawl back and slowly recover people who seem to be lost to reality. And I would also say I'm part of it, although I try not to do it. The mainstream media is incredibly unhelpful in the defense of democracy. Mm-hmm. Not only have they turned everything into a game, everything into a horse race, without a thought to the real stakes of democracy, but we are still in a whataboutism world. We're still in a but on the other hand world. We are still treating Republicans like normal candidates, yes, which they are not.
Thank you.
Which they are not. And there is still an excessive sense of gloom about, the tagline is always Democrats in disarray. It's not a joke. It is painted with such a dark, dystopic feeling. And let's just look at what could potentially happen. Michigan, which had slipped out behind the blue wall, may be recovered in a very big way across the board with the Secretary of State, the Attorney General, the governor. Maggie Hassan, who was thought to be on the ropes, looks like she's going to win by a fair margin.
Yeah.
We have an outstanding candidate, outstanding in Tim Ryan, who is running 8 points ahead of where Joe Biden ran in 2020. We have superstars in the making in Jared Polis, Josh Shapiro,
Yeah.
Raphael Warnock, Wes Moore. There are not only bright spots, but there is a glass half full there. We are not getting that in the news coverage. We are not getting that in the ethos. And it pains me as someone who is new to your side that the instinct for perpetual gloom and to talk oneself into depression is so pervasive that it does act as a drag, I think. I'll tell you what I'm very optimistic about. I'm optimistic about young voters and I'm optimistic about women. If women can get out in darn Kansas and protect reproductive rights, if young people can stand in line for hours at University of Michigan, we are not lost. We just have to figure out how to get from where we are to where they will be without completely losing our democracy. And I think there will be some bright spots. And I hope that at the end of tonight or tomorrow or a week from now, it is not as catastrophic as so many were putting forth, and that in itself becomes a lesson both for the media as well as for the Democrats, and that we look at the people who ran much stronger than they should have and the people who ran weaker than they should have, and we use that to inform who has to be the leadership going forward. So I have this same dichotomy, the same conflict. I am optimistic in the long run, but pessimistic in the short run. And I don't know how we get past the pessimism in the short run to get to the long run. I don't have a medium game plan, a medium length game plan.
Yeah, it is a conundrum because honestly, and I'm not pessimistic about anything, but the results are going to be the results. And if the Republicans win, it just makes 2024 that much harder. So it's more structural than anything else. But just a couple of quick updates. Josh Shapiro won the gubernatorial race in Pennsylvania, as he should have, because his opponent was a fascist, and still is. But thankfully, he's not a governor who's a fascist.
Yeah.
And not surprisingly, but depressingly, Greg Abbott, who's responsible for the deaths of God knows how many people and should be in prison, beat Beto O'Rourke. And we have a cat also.
Yes, all kitty.
Everybody feel better. So yeah, Greg Abbott, criminal, and just absolutely hideous human being. Texas, get your act together. Dahlia, I know you need to leave soon, and Mara, you do as well. So Dahlia, you're next, and then Mara, just after Dahlia, just give us some last thoughts before you have to go.
So I think I'm going to just preempt Norm, but I'll just say that the things that I'm watching are the sort of big structural things more than any one race. There's some good news, right? I think that for those of us who thought this was going to be a story of vigilantes with guns and body armor terrorizing people at the polls, that hasn't manifested. We haven't seen catastrophic breakdowns in voting. We've seen a couple of glitches, but nothing, on a scale that I was prepared to worry about. And I think that's really, really good news in a localized, decentralized election system where things can go horribly wrong. Mm-hmm. That's the great news. I think the bad news is that the election deniers, the Carrie Lakes and the Donald Trumps, are already saying that the election was stolen and already making claims about things that are happening in Arizona or in Michigan that are kind of normal and to be expected. And, the capstone there, of course, is, the claims that whatever vote isn't counted by midnight tonight is illegitimate. So I think that what I want to center maybe a little bit is that what's profoundly different from what we saw in 2020 is that now the number of people who are making claims about stolen elections, about, massive rampant vote fraud. I think that's really terrifying. And that's what's different, right? This was a crackpot idea, and now it's become a mainstream idea that any deviation from the norm means that, poll workers are liars and that the Justice Department shouldn't be allowed in to observe in Florida. That stuff is really scary. And I think existentially scary. The only other point I want to make, and I just say this as the Supreme Court watcher, is that if this election doesn't prove to be a massive rebuke to the US Supreme Court, then we have really, really failed. And so while I want to sort of align myself with Jennifer Rubin, who says, I think women and young people are going to show up in big ways, I really, really, really wish that everybody went to the polls voting with Sam Alito at top of mind. Yeah. And saying that at minimum, we want to cabin a runaway court that doesn't seem to care what the public thinks. And I wish that I was seeing that manifest today. I'm not sure I'm seeing it.
Yeah. But Mara, just really quickly, before I get to you, I just want to let everybody know that per norm, Abigail Spanberger has been declared the winner. She will hold her seat, which is very, very good news.
Yes.
I don't know about Luria, but if Luria can narrow the gap at least, that also will be a good thing. And just also quickly to Dahlia's point, I think if the Supreme Court was not top of mind, there are all sorts of reasons for that, and we will need to grapple with those when this election is over. But I think it's important to say that the problem in that regard, if indeed that the votes from women don't add up the way they should under the circumstances, we need to specify, of course, that it's white women who are the problem in this instance, as they always are. Anyway, Mara.
So I just wanted to go back to a point that Jennifer made. And I do think it's significant that you're, new to the Democratic Big D point of view, because really this shouldn't be about partisanship at all. Unfortunately, we only have one major party in the United States. Right. It bears repeating, that is tethered to reality and to democracy at the moment. And that in and of itself is a problem, because, the Democratic Party needs real competition as well. And you see that failure of legitimate competition playing out in New York in ways that we haven't seen yet. So that's right. But I do think Jennifer's point, I just want to take a little farther, is so important, because, it is a moment for, I think, anger, righteous anger, and for organizing, but it's really a bad time for defeatism. And I think Democrats have kind of long had that culture of defeatism, and there's some reasons for that. I get it, but it's really, cynicism will just make people stay home. And not to get too deep about it, but I did find myself a little depressed this morning. So I kind of had a little pep talk with myself. And the first thing I did this morning was I watched some pretty extraordinary silent footage that my grandfather shot in 1942 of his brother actually marching in a segregated army regiment through the streets of Detroit on his way to fight the Nazis during World War II. And I actually posted on Twitter. It's really fun. You think to yourself, okay, you got to take the longer view here, and you can be absolutely furious, and you should be. So you don't want to make light of these problems, but you got to pace yourself so that you can keep showing up for yourself, your fellow citizens, your kids, what have you. And I think, Jennifer, to your point, we really have to be asking more of voters, treating them like adults, holding them responsible. And there's a time for persuasion, but there's also a time to say this movement needs to be defeated, not the average people who might be, kind of brought along for the ride. There's got to be a way to bring them back into democracy eventually, I hope. But this is a movement that has to be defeated. And I think the sooner we agree on that, the better off we'll be. So I wish we could do this every day. And I'm really grateful to be with you guys tonight.
We might do it every day because it's that serious. But seriously, thank you so much, Mara, for being here, and I hope you get some sleep.
Thanks.
And wake up to
Tomorrow's
really good news.
Go blue.
Go blue.
Go blue.
Go blue.
Bye.
Tomorrow's point, when I get depressed, I go to the top of the Twitter feed for my idol, really, Cheryl Eiffel. And it has a clip of her from an interview. And she's asked, what gives you hope? And she says, you know, never in American history have African Americans and African American women said, and then they gave up. And that is a spur to me, an incentive to me. If people who have been beaten down, who have lost not only one election, but decades, have had the perseverance to be patriots, to serve in World War II in a war against fascism, to fight for democracy, then we can too. And it reminds me that we can't be wimps. We cannot be set back by a single defeat or a series of defeats. And, you know, you keep going. And the most important thing, I really mean this is not solace, is to be fighting on the right side of history, to be fighting the good fight, and to know that you've done everything you can for democracy and for your country. And you won't always win, but you got to do the right thing. You got to do the right thing. And I commend to everyone John Meacham's new book on Lincoln, which talks about conforming our politics to our conscience, conforming our politics to morality. And that's got to be the goal here.
Yeah, absolutely. And not just laying everything out on the field, but understanding that the fight is continuous. It's not, democracy is not an end. It is a process, and it is a process we always need to be engaged in. And one of the challenges that we face is making that the rule, making that how we go about being citizens in America. AG, I know you got to get going soon, so you're up.
Hi, everybody. It's really great to see you, Mary. Thanks for having me. The first thing that I want to say is that there's no red wave tonight. We can say that there is no red wave, and we need to put that out on social media often, and we need to keep repeating it, and we need to drive that into the ground the way Republicans repeat their, you know what, over and over again.
Lies, fascistic bullshit.
Oh, I can say bullshit on here. That's right.
You can say whatever
you can swear.
Yes,
there is no red wave. That's a very, very important message to get across, because that's what they were saying. Now, I wanted to piggyback a little bit on what Dahlia was talking about with regard to the Supreme Court, because we watch Florida very closely, and it just bam, went red. The dick of the United States. I like Patton Oswalt, where he says, actually, the United States, Maine is its little weird dick, and Florida is its giant ball sack. But what I think is happening with, and I, piggybacking on what Dahlia was talking about, what we're seeing in Florida, part of what we're seeing in Florida is a direct result of the Supreme Court gutting the Voting Rights Act and making it so that, that you can gerrymander districts. We flipped 3 House seats in Florida for the sole purpose of trying to get the House back with these maps that DeSantis drew. And I think it's really important that, part of our plan going forward is Democrats have to think harder. They were, she was saying, is Alito at top of your mind when you go into the polling booth? We have to think really hard about what we're doing with our federal bench and with our Supreme Court, and elect people who are willing to expand it, because that's the only way out of this. We can codify Roe, we can codify voting rights. It'll just get gutted again in this extreme Supreme Court. Some races I'm watching very intently, obviously Pennsylvania. There's a lot of potential House pickups for Dems in Ohio. And that's what I'm looking at to negate what DeSantis did down in Florida with his, redistricting shit show. And of course, I'm also looking at Nevada. I'm worried about maybe some, the Dems enthusiasm or lack thereof in Nevada. And I think that that's something that we can focus on going forward. But I really just want to drill down that there is no red wave and how important that is, and how that's, I'm always, eternal optimist, but that's what makes me feel good about tonight. No matter what happens, a red wave didn't happen. So.
Yeah. And you know what, AG, I got to say that I think it's apart from optimism, that had everything to do with egregiously wrong media framing. We're told 8 months ago that, well, of course the Republicans are going to win big. It's an off year. Democrats are the party in power. And as soon as the Democrats gain a slight lead and then lose it a little bit, suddenly it's disaster for Democrats. When even if Democrats were to lose, which they're not going to do, by a small margin, that's a disaster for Republicans. So anyway, Kimberly, and bodes well, even if we lose temporarily, losing by small margin is much better than a blowout. And it was never going to be a blowout. There was no evidence that it was going to be a blowout. Anyway, Kimberly, so awesome that you're here. What do you think?
Thank you for having me. Thank you. Well, Allison knows that most of the time I'm incredibly optimistic, and all day I've actually been pretty optimistic. And then as soon as Kornacki comes on the television, I start getting heart palpitations. And seeing what happened in Florida, poor Bob had to listen to me, freaking out, and he's trying to calm me down. And the thing, and I talked to Jennifer.
Are you in separate rooms?
Yes,
we
are.
are.
In fact, I could walk over there.
But they they still like each other. They're just in separate rooms.
It's what keeps the magic alive. But I was talking to Jennifer before we even started, and I was terrified because I'm afraid if we lose the House, that democracy is dead. And Bob is trying to tell me, look, that's 2 years away. But I don't know. I'm a little worried about it. And of course, the races that I'm paying attention to are, obviously Josh Shapiro was just one. So I'm really grateful for that. And then some of the obvious ones. I mean, Fetterman, so far the numbers look good for him. And so there's Fetterman and then also Warnock, because as everybody points out, if Herschel Walker is a United States Senator, that's really, really effing bad. Yeah. So we cannot have that. But generally speaking, I think if we can pull this off, I mean, if we can just keep the House, and I really hope we do, I think that's really promising for the next 2 years. Democrats can get a lot done. Although what Allison said is absolutely true. We have to expand the Supreme Court in order to save anything that the Democrats do in the next 2 years if we've got that power.
No doubt at all. And I was very curious about Josh Shapiro's margin of error. It seems like he's trounced Mastriano.
Oh, good.
And the reason that's important, besides the fact that Mastriano deserves to be trounced, is that the hope is that there will be coattails for Fetterman, who had a stroke. And unfortunately, that definitely plays a role in people's decisions sometimes. So, Bob, I want to know what races you're looking at, but I also want to know what you think. Like, do you really think, what? I don't want to, sorry, I was about to get ahead of ourselves, and I don't want to do that just because it's going to be a long night, and why get ahead of ourselves? We have plenty of time. But talk about some races and just sort of your general sense of kind of why we're at this sort of moment where we're hanging on by our fingernails.
Well, the race that I'm watching as sort of a bellwether in all of this is the Tim Ryan, J.D. Vance race in Ohio. If Tim Ryan wins that, if we get a call for Tim Ryan in Ohio, that's great news for the Senate firewall in Congress. So, because it's really sort of one of those third or fourth tier races that people were watching, because I'm not sure we were all convinced that Tim Ryan could actually do it. It's looking, at least the last I saw, is looking promising for him. But if he does end up pulling that out, that'll be good news for at least the Senate side. And then we're going to be biting our nails about the House side for probably some time now. But the point I wanted to make, a larger point, and this is win or lose, irrespective of how things suss out in Congress or state legislatures or governor's mansions, for that matter, the one piece of the puzzle that I think the Democrats and the left is missing significantly, that is ever present on the right, is an enormous influx of cash into independent media. And I'm probably stepping on our friend Cliff Schecter's toes when I say this, because this is something that he's been talking about with me. I know probably
It's okay.
on
He's
this
not
show.
here. You can say whatever you want.
Yeah. Well, this is something that he talks about a lot, which is that the propaganda machine on the right is enormous, whether it's AM talk radio, whether it's podcasts, whether it's bulk book buying. They are, I am absolutely positive they're buying shares, likes, follows on social media. You can buy all that stuff. Couple of clicks, you're buying millions of downloads for your Ben Shapiro podcast if you want to. I'm not necessarily saying that he's doing that. It's one of those things, well, you know, if there's smoke, if they're doing bulk book buying and all this money is being pumped into that to just get them on the New York Times bestseller list, then it's probably a good hunch that they're doing something along those lines with podcasting and social media. So the point being is that where's the money on the Democratic side? Where's that kind of money coming in? I don't see it. I don't think any of us are collecting George Soros checks, the mythical George Soros checks. It's not happening. So I think moving forward, if we want to reach out to some of those unregistered voters, if we want to bring more people in, we have to absolutely pump up the amount of money that is being poured in, because I would wager it's got to be 80-20 if you were to look at the split between money going to Republicans and money going to Democrats, as far as that goes, as far as independent media. That's got to change. And if we can't do that, it's going to be an uphill struggle. Every time there's an election, there's a lot of garment rending about messaging, the Democratic messaging. Oh my God, what to do about the Democratic messaging? Well, you're not going to get a great message out if you don't have the money to get it out there. Right. So that has got to be something that we fix, that we focus on between now and 24. Was that?
You didn't get your Soros check?
No, not this month. I don't know where. It must have got Louis DeJoy lost it in the mail or something.
Probably, undoubtedly.
Give me your details, and I'll make sure you get back on the list.
I have to be honest,
Right,
though, the George Soros, in my view, defamation is one of the most bizarre things that I've and long-lived. I mean, it's not going away. It's been around. It's sick, but I think it's a really good indication of where the right's been for a very long time. Dean, I know you need to get going soon, so I want to go to you next. And I do think, one, I want to hear about what races you're looking at, but also the whole idea of how Democrats should be targeting their investments. And I in a weird way, I think the Twitter debacle has kind of brought this to the fore in a way I wasn't really thinking about it before. Part of it is AJ, you got to get going. Thank you for being here. If you can come back, we're going to be here for the duration, probably. If Jen makes me a martini, I'm in for good. Anyway,
good night.
So bye. So I think part of that, Dean, is also figuring out, like, I am one of those people who thinks that Dems should compete. Hey, Charlotte, Dems should compete everywhere. That doesn't mean we need to pour billions of dollars into every race, though, because all races are not alike. I don't think that Charlie Crist was ever going to win. Maybe Val Demings wasn't even going to win. So what are your thoughts on that, in addition to what races you think we need to be looking at?
I'm going to pass. Well, thank you for having me, Mary. I'm kidding, of course. Something never ever said.
It's like you wait.
Oh my God!
For that.
I'm going to do that on cable one day. I'm like, I'm going to pass.
What was that restraint? It seemed so judgy. I was like, what?
Wow.
We're going to move your desk down.
Should
to
I
the
be?
basement.
I'm
Sorry.
feeling hurt.
Can I just say, I never heard Bob Cesca talk before. Bob, you have a great radio voice.
Oh my God!
That's
he's
what I'm
like the
saying.
best
That's what I'm
radio
Oh
voice.
my
saying.
God! I feel like a radio show, and I said like a puppy dog who needing to be pet. And Bob's like, "Hello, everybody. I'm Bob Cesca." How are you?"
All right, boys. What's happening?
So, in any event, what was the question? That was I don't know. Here's the race I'm looking at. Here's the first thing. The race I'm looking
You're a
at. to me-
comedian. You're supposed to be able to track these things.
Allegedly,
Come on.
Right. I think the governorship races, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, are the pathway to citizenship. Without those three governor races, those governorships, which the GOP controls the state legislatures, we'd be in bad news. Pennsylvania, we won. Josh Piro, good guy. I've had him on the show a bunch of times. Michigan, Governor Whitmer is going to win. Tony Evers in Wisconsin's neck and neck.
Yeah.
And Republicans control the state legislature. Governor Evers has vetoed over a dozen pieces of legislation to curtail the vote, suppress the vote, overturn the vote, everything. We need that. And Arizona, I mean, that's not usually in play, but if Carrie Lake and Mark Fincham, and he's a Secretary of State nominee. You mentioned George Soros. Mark Fincham has talked about George Soros and Mike Bloomberg are coming for him. Neither one spending money in the state. What do they have in common? Oh, it's
I
obvious.
think they're Jews.
Right. And the Jewish community there denounced it. And what did he respond, Mark Fincham? He posted, George Soros is coming after me. Give me $15. And I wrote about it for MSNBC. This is anti-Semitism off the charts bullshit that we have going on. So, look, the governor races are key. If we can, there's no red wave. Myra, you were just on my show right before this. The red wave was a mirage created by corporate media for whatever reason. I don't know if it was the depressed Democratic turnout. I don't know if it's because corporate executives want a red wave, so there's less regulations and less taxes, so they make more money, or they just like drama and they want to gin it up. So red wave. I don't know. But the data objectively was not backing it up because the generic congressional ballot, which asked, who do you want to control Congress? 2018 at this time, night before election, Democrats up by 9 points, just about 9. 2010, before that red wave, up by 9.5. Where is it today? Up by 1.2%. The corporate media literally fabricated, I'm not kidding, they literally fabricated a red wave. There was no data to support it. So look, it's not a red wave. It's going to be close. Let's hold on to these governor races because if we lose Wisconsin and Arizona, that means we have to win Georgia, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, or there's no path. Democracy ends as we know it. And I'm coming to you live from, another country, New Jersey.
Wow, that was uplifting. Thank you.
I know.
I love New Jersey, though. I love Jersey, but that's where I'm going.
I liked it better when you passed.
I think, yeah.
I know, me too.
That was my strength.
I do think that
pass. I should have left.
I do not think that it is a bad idea for us to start staking out a Caribbean island where we can all congregate that does not have extradition, if there is such a place.
I found a place. It's called Cayman. It's lovely.
Okay, and we can hide money there too. So, Norm, Dean just mentioned this, and we know that I don't know if it's election related or not, but we know that 7 or 8 Black churches. Just having to say this sends chills down my spine because it is just historically just an abomination. 7 or 8 Black churches were set on fire and burned to the ground. The rates of anti-Semitism, thanks in large part to Donald Trump, have been on the rise since his tragic run for the presidency in 2015 and 2016. And since then, of course, and on top of that, of course, anti-immigrant hatred, anti-Muslim hatred, on and on and on, Norm. And I guess one of the things about this particular election cycle that's so disturbing is that those things haven't broken through. So how do we not make sense of it? Because I think it's actually pretty clear why it happens. It's useful to the right, and the media has, I don't know when this started, but certainly in the recent past has treated things like anti-Semitism, racism, anti-immigrant hatred, et cetera, as winning strategies for the Republican Party. So I guess the question then is, how do we on the right side of things, how do we on the left make those issues relevant in a way that will finally, at long last, get voters who don't belong to those groups to understand that we can have a functioning democracy if such things are allowed?
So let me at least start with sort of less bad news, which is these
Please.
predictions that so many made, including the tilting of these biased Republican polls that flooded the zone, do not appear to be coming true. We're not going to have a red wave. The House is more competitive, I think, than we thought. At least two of those three bellwether Virginia races, these three remarkable women, Jennifer Wexton, Abigail Spanberger, have won. And Elaine Lurie is behind, but there's still a lot of votes to go there.
Right. And we don't know where they're coming from. So that's
right.
also...
Democrats picked up a seat in North Carolina because the courts in North Carolina, unlike the courts in many other places, actually allowed for a fair redistricting. We're seeing at least a seat picked up in Ohio. It's still a long shot for Democrats to win the House, but it's not out of the question. The degree to which Maggie Hassan is winning in New Hampshire is a very good sign. And if Herschel Walker falters, we may not even have a runoff.
Right.
We were seeing polls that show the independent candidate there getting 5%. At this point, he's getting 1 or 2%. So there's some good things happening.
Yeah.
I just saw some results from Dane County in Wisconsin, which is a big one. And Tony Evers, running for re-election as governor, is doing better there than he did the last time. We don't know in a lot of these cases, but we're not seeing a red wave, even if Republicans win in a lot of places. And of course, if they do win the House, we can come back to that. It's catastrophic in many respects for the country and for the world. And if they win the Senate, it's even more catastrophic. But putting that aside and getting to your question, Mary, we're in for some dark times, regardless of what happens tonight or this week or next week. What's been so striking to me is that when we saw vile anti-Semitic comments made by key Republicans, including Donald Trump, not one of their leaders condemned them. When we see racist comments, not one of them condemned them. And the dark times are there. Make America what it was again. In Mississippi, we're making it what it was again in the 1950s. We're going to see a lot more violence too. And what we need to get out of this, obviously we have to convince people that this is terrible, but it's going to be hard to do it if the official position of one of our two major parties is let these old times roll. And if you look at the responses to the assassination attempt against Speaker Pelosi, and it was an assassination attempt against Speaker Pelosi, other than Mitch McConnell, of all people, condemning it as violence, nothing from any of the leaders in the House. When Steve Scalise was shot, Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker, said we're all family and got everybody to rally against this catastrophe. And of course, that was front page above the fold in the New York Times. Paul Pelosi gets his head bashed in what was an attempt to get at the Speaker, and it's below the fold as if it wasn't anything deeply significant. If our major media don't focus on these things, and if one political party endorses them, we're in big trouble. And keep in mind that whatever the Republicans do in the House tonight, the vast majority of them are election-denying radicals who will say zip. They're either radical themselves, and the rest are cowards. So we've got all of these issues. And if Donald disappeared tomorrow, they don't go away. If we end up with a thug like Ron DeSantis as being the leader of the Republican Party, or a better dressed and slightly more urbane thug like the governor of Virginia
Mm-hmm.
being the leader, we've got even bigger challenges ahead. So we better hope that the election turns out to be better than we thought. But we cannot give up, and we have to do everything we can to fight back against this, which is going to get worse. And I'm really concerned about the violence that we have ahead.
Mhm.
And, you know, when Donald Trump says of Nancy Pelosi after all of this that she's an animal, when he says we need to take all the drug dealers, give them a 2-minute trial, shoot them in the heads, and send the bullet to their families, and nobody responds, and that's not front page news everywhere. What the fuck is happening to this country?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is a sign. And if we lose our democracy, so many of those in the mainstream media who treated this election as a normal election, focused only on the horse race,
Mm-hmm.
have not even looked at what the consequences are if the Republicans take the House in aid to Ukraine and what that means for the world, in cutting off funding for the Justice Department, for the Centers for Disease Control for the next pandemic, in trying to shackle the State Department by holding 1 million investigations of Afghanistan and tying them all down, by pushing us to a default. That's not even news anywhere. And, you know, there are a couple of editorials here and there. There are pieces that some of us write about this. It doesn't get picked up on. We have so many problems. And no matter how much we pound away at the Times or the networks, they don't change.
Yeah. Norm, there's so much there in what you just said, but I know Jennifer needs to get going because her cold meds are going to be kicking in. Kimberly also needs to leave at 10. So I want to go Jennifer and then Kimberly, your final thoughts for at least for this particular session. And then we're going to go to Waj and Charlotte and pick up on some of the things that Norm laid out for us.
To pick up on Norm's point, we are confronted with a fascist party. It is not inappropriate to call them that. What else do you call a party that instrumentalizes violence, that preys on xenophobia, that wants to return women to the home into a breeder role, that wants to institute a Christian nationalism as the official ethos, the official religion of the country? This is fascism. And I think we've gotten to be too polite. If anyone in the media uses the word conservative one more time, I'm really going to throw up.
Totally.
This is not conservative. This is reactionary. This is fascism. And we have to start acting like it. And I must say, there is a failure, I think, to really connect the dots. Anti-Semitism, violence towards African Americans, xenophobia, and loss of women's bodily control are all of a piece. They're all things that fascists do. Look at Brazil, look at Italy in 1930, look wherever, and you will see this common pattern. And I think we really have to make that clear that that's what we're up against. And my hope would be that perhaps a better than expected showing causes the mainstream media, why I keep hoping, I don't know, to recover some sense of sanity and really puts an end, frankly, to the polling industry. I could frankly use an astrologer and come up with better results than these folks, or perhaps a blindfolded dark contest. It's a sham. It's a sham as much as anything Donald Trump has ever put together. And we really should stop writing about them and taking them seriously.
Totally.
So on that lovely note, I'll say good night to all of you.
Good night.
Feel better. Thank you
Feel better,
so much
Jen.
for coming. Kimberly.
Yeah, what I wanted to add to what Jennifer was saying earlier about the voters, because we have a voter problem, and we absolutely do. But part of the reason is because we have these right-wing machines, whether it's Fox News. And I just want to speak to, there's obviously, as we all have, people in our families. One of mine is a MAGA. I was talking to her last night, and
Only one?
Well, yeah. well, on my side of the family, but it's a small family. So anyway, the conversation was first about some family drama. And without getting into details about the family drama, California was mentioned. So this MAGA relative has to throw out there, well, you know, California's so soft on crime. Now, I try not to argue with this person because there's no point. And then we were getting into it a little more. And I was telling her about this new website thing that, you know, I'm interested in, long story. But anyway, I said, we want to have, and so I reach out to her, right? And I say, we want to have conservative voices and we want to have liberal voices. We don't just want a liberal echo chamber. I said, you know, but we absolutely will not put up with hate speech and disinformation. Well, everything changed. She didn't start yelling at me, but her voice changed. She was agitated and she got very angry. And she said, oh, well, they're just calling opinion hate speech. You have to be careful about that. Everything isn't hate speech. And I said, well, you know, if you have the N-word repeated several times, that's not going to be allowed. And she was very quiet when I said that. She didn't say anything. And so I think, you know, again, to Jennifer Rubin's point, part of the problem is the voters, but because half the country is brainwashed by literal propaganda. It's like Russian propaganda, except it's in America. And it's upsetting to me. And I don't know what the answer is, but I think I do agree we have to somehow get to the voters. But I think we have to figure out a way to stop this propaganda machine because it literally is killing us.
Yeah. And Dean just left. Okay. Because Dean also had to leave at 10. But yes, it is. That's why. And look, I'm guilty of this too. I've said many, many times there are more of us than there are of them. But you know what? In the face of gerrymandering, the electoral college, the filibuster, the fact that we've got a massive right-wing media propaganda machine that is unchallenged by anything on the left, by the fact that they have more of the money, that by the fact, Cliff, hey, how are you doing?
How are you?
By the fact that they have Citizens United and 6 Supreme Court justices in their back pocket, and by the fact that Donald has God knows what kind of information on his political opponents from the FBI that he can use, which he, you know, essentially gave a hint at today in vis-a-vis the sanctimonious. So Waj, you know, it does feel, and it has for a long time felt like whether we're in the minority or we're in the majority, it always feels like we're in the minority. And just to cheer everybody up, I just want to say really quickly that the execrable Sarah Huckabee Sanders is now a fucking governor.
Oh, man.
I mean, we shouldn't be surprised because it's Arkansas, and that's been ever since Clinton, that's been shifting to the right. But other than Walker, I really, it's hard to think of a less qualified, more egregious person. Anyway, that aside, Waj.
Bye, everyone.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody.
Thanks, Kimberly.
Nice meeting you, Kimberly, for the first time. Nice meeting you, Rachel. Nice to see everyone else who's been here. Thank you for your comments. I've been listening for a while. So, for those in the comment section, and I read the comments, I'm not exhausted. I'm not despondent. I'm just exhausted because I took a flight today, and I'm in Florida, and I'll explain why at the end, which is something hopeful, or at least a timeline cleanser.
Right. It is.
Yes, and so it's an interesting place, this Florida, but. Just to pick up on some of the points everyone's saying is, you know, Abigail Spanberger just won in Virginia, and so did Jennifer Wexton. And the reason why that's very encouraging is those were seen as 2 bellwether races, right? Now, we're still waiting to see what's happening in Nevada. We're still waiting to see what's happening in Arizona. But the fact that Abigail Spanberger won is a testament that historically, for those who follow this, right, this should be a layup for Republicans. This should be a red tsunami. Obama lost more than 50 seats. Clinton lost more than 60. Trump lost 40 plus. And you have inflation and you have gas prices. So if you take that into account, this should be a no-brainer. Like, we should all be sleeping right now. They should have lost the Senate. House should be 40 seats easy. House is very competitive. I still think, I hope I'm wrong, the Dems will lose. And Senate might go to a runoff, and we might be able to hold the Senate. Let's see. hopefully not from my words, not to God's ears, and he strikes it down and smotes what I said in the first part of the house.
No smiting.
Good halal smiting. But what it reveals is the extremism of the Republican Party. The fact that they ran candidates that everyone has talked about, Herschel Walker, Doug Mastriano, who doesn't believe in the separation of church and state, Blake Masters, backed by white nationalist Peter Thiel, Mark Fincham, Secretary of State, backed by Trump in Arizona, who, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, is a member of the Oath Keepers. Carrie Lake, who just threatened a journalist earlier today and somehow believes that she's running for 8 years magically. The fact that we have the threat, the Republican gubernatorial candidate who openly said that if Republicans win, they're never going to lose again. He said that in Wisconsin. And so what we're dealing with, and I think what Norm makes an interesting point and a smart point, is regardless of what happens tonight or tomorrow, this fight is ongoing. We're dealing with a radicalized, weaponized movement that is the minority, Mary. The one positive that we have is that we are the majority. All the data reveals we are the majority. I think the reason why we get despondent is we sit there and see someone like Herschel Walker or a Carrie Lake or a Doug Mastriano or a Trump, and you're like, no sane, patriotic American would ever vote for these people, and Trump becomes president. And you're neck and neck between Warnock and Walker. And that kind of dooms your heart and makes you sink a little bit because you think it should be a slam dunk, but it isn't. This is the death rattle of white supremacy that is transforming into a death march. We see disinformation, and now we've seen nearly $1 billion worth of money in this election cycle alone being spent by right-wing billionaires to influence the election and flood the zone with shit. So regardless of what happens, folks, and this is not to make you despondent, but this is to energize you, we have the numbers. And what I've said before, this analogy on Mary's show, is give me a radicalized, zealous, organized minority that wakes up every day with a fighting spirit and a mission over a flabby, moderate majority, because they will carve through us like butter. However, with the Republicans going so extreme, you know, we've been talking about this for months now, Mary, on your show. We've been saying I think Democrats should just listen to us, because lo and behold, defense of democracy, once they started messaging on it, what's the top 5 issue, ladies and gentlemen, if you're looking at the polls? Abortion rights, what's the top 5 issue, right? What's mobilizing people to come out, even in places like Kentucky? So what we need for Democrats, and I hope what the pivot for Biden is, you can't do reconciliation with these people who want to kill you, who want to kill Mike Pence, who want to kill Rusty Bowers, who want to kill freaking Liz Cheney. If they want to kill Mike Pence, what are they going to do to the Brady bunch right here, the progressive Brady bunch that's just assembled in these squares, right? And so I think that fighting spirit has to be organized and marshaled by the Democratic Party and by all of us on the local and state level. What I'll also say is with media, and I'm going to do a layup for Cliff, set him up. You know, I was doing a debate yesterday, and I said the media, I agree with Steve Bannon. He says the enemy is the media. Media is the battleground. You have a majority of Republican candidates right now that are running in this election, ladies and gentlemen, who are election deniers. Why? Because a majority of Republican voters believe in the big lie. They also believe in the replacement theory. And now QAnon, that we used to laugh about, is being blared and messaged from Trump rallies. It is a right-wing ecosystem that has radicalized about a third of our fellow countrymen. And because of the failure of the media establishments, they will normalize it. This is how it seeps through. And a joke that I did on Twitter when Carrie Lake threatened the press earlier today, our political journalists will run to Carrie Lake and say, can you give me an exclusive about how you'll kill me? Thank you so much. Can you give me a scoop about how exactly you'll destroy me? And so they will fail us, which is why if there's any billionaire listening, listen to Cliff and listen to Kurt and invest your money in media, which takes them on and doesn't do a both sides false equivalence, which is going to be the trend for the next 2 years. Finally, the point I'll end on is regardless of what happens tonight, why we should be hopeful. Again, history here is a good reminder. This should have been a red wave. This should be slam dunks for Republicans in this economy. Biden, sucks for him, regardless if you're a Republican or Democrat. When you inherit a poor economy, you get screwed. Inflation, gas prices are not his problems, not ones he created. He's going to get blamed for it.
Yep.
And historical trend that the party that doesn't have the presidency loses. the fact that so many people have come out and the fact that this red wave might be a red trickle means that we are organized and galvanized, but we're dealing with a fascist movement that wants power by any means necessary. And what keeps me hopeful, and the reason why I'm in Florida today, is because my daughter had a Make-A-Wish wish that we delayed for 3 years, ever since she survived her stage 4 cancer. And just this week was the first week we finally got it, and we're in Florida because she wants to be a princess, and she made her hair into, who's the one from Frozen? Not Anna, but Elsa. So now she's, yeah, and the other one looks like Snow White. And my son got his hair painted red because he looks like a Ninjago character. And the place where I'm at right now in Florida, which I won't name, everyone who's here treating these kids like queens and kings volunteers, ladies and gentlemen. They volunteer. And so here we are, and I'm celebrating my daughter's Make-A-Wish wish. She should have died 3 years ago, but here she is alive. If you see her now, I think Mary and a few others have seen her. You'll be amazed that this girl ever had stage 4 cancer. And there were moments in the journey where we thought her story ended. It was over. Like, it's impossible. But there was a plot twist, and there was a community of people who rallied to save this little girl. And she got an anonymous liver donor to step up and give a piece of her liver. Now, fast forward 3 years, she just celebrated her 6th birthday, and she has ear piercings, and she's dressed like Elsa. So this is a long journey. And if you're a student of U.S. history, and if you're a student of what's happened to Black folks, poor folks, the indigenous folks, you know that they could never give up. They had to fight for everything, and they're still fighting. And so we should learn from our ancestors, unite with people, don't be purists. We're fighting for democracy. And the one positive that we have is that we have the majority. Thank you for letting me rant. I appreciate you inviting me.
No, that is in some ways exactly the kind of story we need, because there are many, many reasons to be cynical about our fellow Americans, particularly, or in some cases, almost exclusively, our fellow white Americans. And I think, as you say, Waj, people of color in this country have never had the luxury of saying, you know what, I tried. I'm not going to try anymore.
I'm going to tap out.
Tapping out. There's no tapping out. And I think if in some ways, if white Americans, particularly working class or middle class white Americans, could understand that they've been scammed since the very beginning, by being convinced that their whiteness was more valuable than making common cause with, at the very beginning, Black Americans who were in the same economic straits and who could have benefited from joining together against their oppressors, then we would be having a very different conversation now. So we need to feel we need stories like that, because we are living in it's very difficult to get to the point where you feel like you're living through the end of history, where you feel like any progress we've made is ephemeral and can be undone by the kinds of progress we should be making consistently. We finally get a Black president, and then the backlash is so severe that suddenly we're in a position where, and this is not an exaggeration, we may get to the point where the American experiment fails entirely. So thank you for that, Waj. And I'm so happy you guys are down there. And I hope the hurricane stays out of your way, because you need to just go have fun and be princesses. Quick update, Marcy Kaptur in Ohio 9, Democrat in Ohio 9. That race was also considered something of a bellwether, and she was, if a Republican had won, it would have been very bad news. And not only did she win, or I don't know if they've called it yet, but she's leading by double digits. So that's good. That's very, 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 very good. So Charlotte, again, there's just so the complexities of the time in which we live are are so astonishing, and in some ways it also just feels like it's really simple, right? It's coming down to what it's coming down to, in some ways, ignorance and what's the word I'm looking for?
Bliss.
No, no, there's no bliss here. That's the problem. There's no
I
bliss
know.
at
I'm
all.
sorry.
That's okay. Ignorance and malevolence, right? There's just, we're fighting on so many different fronts that I think it's really difficult, even for those people who might be willing to keep an open mind or pay attention. It's very difficult to understand, to figure out how to convey a message that's coherent. And luckily, though, Virginia has been kind of ground zero for the vicissitudes of what's going on in this country, from Youngkin now to the potential that the 3 Democratic races that have been said to be bellwethers, telling us whether there's going to be a bad night for Republicans, a red trickle, a red wave, or a red tsunami. At least 2 of those 3 are looking good for Democrats.
Yeah. The the 3 races in question are Elaine Luria, Abigail Spanberger, and Jennifer Wexton. And it appears that Spanberger and Wexton are going to hold on to their seats, which is huge news, especially Spanberger. She has been in the crosshairs of the GOP now for, I would say, 4 years, ever since she was initially elected in 2018. It looks like Luria is not going to survive this cycle. Maybe she'll come back next cycle and do it. But that's huge. If we had lost 2 of those or 3 of those, we would be looking at a very, very bad night. So the fact that we're doing that well is really good. And by the way, folks, in 2010, when President Obama suffered the biggest midterm House loss in modern history, 63 seats in one night, they had, every major news outlet had called the House for GOP control by like 8:50, 9 o'clock. So we're now heading towards 10:30.
Right.
And it's not been called yet. Now,
Right.
I don't think that we're going to win the House. I really don't. I think that we'll probably lose the House tonight. But that bodes really well for us maintaining control of the Senate. And it bodes well for us keeping the Republican margin very, very slim, so that in 2024, we have a damn good chance of taking back the House when this comes. I am optimistic tonight in seeing these results. I really am. I know that, yes, we're looking at 2 years of investigations and bullshit and nonsense from the GOP. I get that. There's a lot of stuff that's going to be not so great over the next 2 years. But the fact that we've held the line this strongly tonight, after the GOP throwing everything they can at the Democratic Party, the kitchen sink included, and we've survived as well as we have so far tonight, that's really good news. So I'm pretty happy right now.
And Charlotte, I think we also, in addition to what the Republicans have been throwing at us, I think we also need to throw in what the media have been throwing at us, which is to say, we've spoken about the just obscene levels of anti-Semitism, anti-Muslim hatred, homophobia, particularly towards trans people in this country, anti-immigrant hatred, et cetera, coming from Republican candidates. And the response of the media is essentially to say, yeah, that's a really good strategy because it's working for them.
There's no pushback, right?
So I think that it's one thing to take away, whatever we take away from tonight is we're going to have to fold into the way we move forward in 2024 vis-a-vis the Republican Party, right? The Democrats need to learn how to fight differently. It's the media I worry about more, actually.
Yeah, because the media is afraid of much, and I don't want to characterize all of media, but much of the traditional press is afraid of losing access to Republican power centers if they're critical. I've talked to many reporters. I'm not going to call anyone out, but I've had many coffees with reporters over the last 6 months, and to a person. They have more or less admitted to that large concern, that they are afraid to call out Republicans because they may lose influence or access, especially with what they believe was the inevitability of the GOP taking back control of the House. So, I think that the lesson for Democrats to take away right now is we need to get a fucking message and a united front and push that for the next 2 years. This squabbling, this internal squabbling that's going on between different factions and different wings, I'm tired of it.
Yeah.
It's not going to win us any hell. It's not going to win us anything. We're really on our own right now. The progressive movement, the Democratic Party. Brian, I see your hand. Don't worry. We'll get to you in a second. We're almost there. But we have to wake up and understand that this is going to take a united front. And this internal squabbling, this blaming shit on everyone else it's not going to win us any favors. We have to give Americans a vision to hope for, a vision that makes them united and hopeful for the future. And that's not what we're doing right now. And it's really killing us.
Yeah. And Brian, I know you're eager to get in here. I think to that point, one of the problems is, and we've talked about this before, is that it is really, really easy for the Republicans to have a united message because there's such a monolithic party. There's no diversity there. The Democrats, on the other hand, have a very diverse coalition. The Democratic Party has had to become bigger as the Republican Party has gotten smaller. And we kind of see this weird phenomenon in which voters, they want unity, no matter what that means. Just like in some cases, they want their candidates. They want to feel like their candidates fighting for them, no matter what that means. Like they think that Donald Trump is fighting for them, which is insane, but they think that. So that is something that the Democrats have to figure out how to, because we really are fighting for people, first of all, and we really do have a united message that could appeal to most Americans if we could just figure out what it is.
It's good to go.
Yeah, you are good to go.
Thanks. I was going to read you guys something that I wrote real brief that I want you to think about, but I wanted to push back against Charlotte just a little bit. I don't think you really understand the press. It's not that they're afraid of losing access to Republican candidates.
I'm pretty sure she does, but
hold on. It's not that. From working in the press, I can tell you exactly what they're afraid of losing access to. You, the voter, and the viewer. And they're afraid, they're scared shitless. Most young reporters are far more progressive than they are conservative. Their fear is that they're going to be seen as being progressive and tilted toward the left, and the right beats them over the head all the time with the fact that you're left-leaning, so they bend over backwards to be not what they are. It's the most disingenuous thing you'll ever see, and that's the problem with the press. We don't deal with that problem because we sometimes really don't, in our own business, don't know what it is. But here's what I wanted to read for you. I began asking a simple question. Would you want to hold public office? And I think the elections this year show that the overwhelming majority of us say no. And we all know why. Why do you think politicians suck so bad? Nobody worth a shit wants the job, or at least few do. Of course, the opposite may be true, and we're full of shit, and politicians do represent the best of us. However, I'm an optimist. I think there are people worth a shit who don't want to be involved in politics, and the same can be said of the press. We should attract the best and brightest we're a constitutional necessity that makes democracy possible, but there's no money in that. The modern press today is nothing more than a frickin' money weather vane. Whenever we find the most money, we'll be there. So people who are worth a shit don't want to become involved in the press either, or they do and leave shortly thereafter. And then both careers attract people who are ambitious and committed, but committed to what? I have no idea. We can't call out facts for what they are, but we easily publish or produce fiction at an astounding rate. You cannot have a functioning democracy without a well-informed electorate, and now you know why politicians don't want you well-informed. Watching and participating in this year's midterm election was the most unique I'd ever covered in 40 years, for too many reasons to note. Underlying all of it is a sense of tiredness among an electorate that knows there's something wrong, but because of our group voting record in the last half century, we haven't yet learned why something's wrong. And as much as I said the polls were full of shit, as Trump was when he refused to answer my question about a peaceful transfer of power, listen now when I say the obvious, and I'm not brilliant. We're now in the middle of several fights we already thought were over. The dark times are there. We're making what it was again in the 1950s. Norm, you said earlier tonight, I took you as an inspiration, brother. Meanwhile, Ron DeSantis has announced from Florida Tuesday night that Florida is where wokeism goes to die. He said it with the zeal of a Christian zealot who claims he's a prophet from God. He has. So that's okay. We're not going to cover that in the press. We love the horse race, baby.
I'm sorry. I have some breaking news. I mean, I'm sorry, Brian.
Last sentence, because we have devolved into being barely capable of covering a horse race. But I still have hope. That's it.
That is amazing. But have you all seen something I just saw come in from a text from a friend that Steve Kornacki is saying that maybe Boebert is behind in Colorado?
She is.
She's behind 6 points.
Oh,
71% in.
71% of the vote is in, and she's down by 4.
That's
I
early.
would pray to any God or no God at all to
It's
get
it's
her out
early
of the
days
house.
though. I mean, we don't know where the remaining votes are coming from.
What you have to really worry about on all these races is where the outstanding votes are, when they were cast, and have what's been counted. And if
it's true, but the thing is
hang on a second, Cliff. Cliff, we're gonna go.
crazy.
Yes, she is. Cliff, I want to go to you next, but I just want to check in with Rachel. Are you okay?
Rachel, you have to unmute yourself.
I'm enjoying listening to everyone. Sorry, but
okay.
I'm tired and sick as well. But sorry if I look disinterested. But
you look great.
No. You just look. I just wanted to make sure everything is okay because you look very tired, and I know it's the middle of the night where you are.
It's 3:30, but I don't think I'm going to go to sleep anytime soon.
Everybody here,
I'm enjoying.
Sick, so
I will probably fall off soon, but I'm enjoying listening to everyone.
Okay, well, keep me everybody keep me posted before you have to leave because I want you to get your last word in before you have to take off. And now
I don't have to leave, but I was gonna go go shake a martini. But go
shake.
Will you catch me up on what I missed when I'm gone?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'll be back shortly.
All right, so Cliff is gonna get what is essentially his first word. So go for it.
Oh yeah, well, cool. Good to be here, everybody. I was gonna say about the Boebert race. I'd actually I had a feeling we could take that one because again, she's got this sort of MTG gate level of insanity, but it is only a plus. I think it's a +4 or 5 Republican district. Like if Colorado is a Democratic state, we changed that district and made it less Republican, and she still kept acting the way she acts because I don't think she can control herself. She is who she is, and so. Brian's right. It's always a question of what's come in. We don't know what's come in yet exactly, but there is a very legit chance, no matter what has come in, that she could lose that race. And Frisch,
one can hope, brother. One can
was
hope.
tied with her, like down a point or two. So, and wouldn't it be amazing if that's how we held the House? Because
that's exactly.
It really would be. Actually,
it'd be too perfect.
I love where your mind went.
No, look, otherwise, all I've got to say is what everybody, similar to what everybody else has been saying. Waj earlier was talking about the media, and, this is the reason why we have to, and you talked about it too, Mary, we need our own media. We need more investment in it. I know I sound like a broken record on this, but they will normalize anything. They've proven that again. Think about tonight right now, how close it is and that Warnock could lose to Herschel Walker. The guy held a gun to his wife's head and threatened to blow her brains out. That honestly should be, at that point, that's so disqualifying to treat that person as a normal candidate ever again. Anything they say, anything they do. I'm sorry. At that point, that's not taking partisan sides. It's taking
Are those
human.
numbers closing, Cliff? Or is it getting the margin getting closer?
Walker's leading by less than 1.
Yeah, it's very, very close.
With 76%.
Everybody needs to remember it's Georgia, so if nobody gets 50%, it goes to a runoff next month.
Again.
And there's a very good chance that happens. But the point is that how is it that Walker is even, in a position to win? When he legitimately had 2 different women go to the police and say that he's threatened, and besides his wife, another woman threatened to murder them. We can go on and on. The lies.
He played football in Georgia, Cliff. Don't you understand? He's God. Yeah. And by the way, if I vote for him, it proves I'm not racist.
I know, and I can make all the jokes, and I will too, because I laugh sometimes. But the fact is that they won't. I mean, the woman running for Secretary of State in Michigan believes in sexually transmitted demons, and they're treating her like a real person. Like they treat these people like real. I mean, do you remember like a decade plus ago that when in Delaware the candidate had to say, "I don't think I'm a witch," and do a TV ad?
Mhm.
That's like every freaking Republican candidate now. Like,
Yeah,
back
you
then
know,
it was
and
crazy.
Sharon Angle, the demon sheep one, that was hysterical. But Cliff, you know what we're seeing is that even 4 years ago or 6 years ago, what was untenable
Yep.
has now been mainstreamed. Roy Moore would win now.
Yep, he would.
Roy Moore, who was credibly accused of
He called a
child
13-year-old
abuse.
during her trigonometry class to ask her out.
Yeah, I mean, he sexually abused young girls, and he
even
lost it. It was Alabama, so he didn't lose by that much, but he did lose. And then they get Doug Jones, who was a fine senator. He's a great man with an incredible record as a prosecutor, and he represented his state admirably. And then he loses to a fucking football coach who probably has the IQ of I don't know, an amoeba.
The
And
highest,
I don't mean to
number
insult
jersey he could
amoebas.
have, 79. That's
Let
I
us
mean,
note that
seriously,
football
so
coach
that high.
said one of the most vile racist things in public that you can imagine, and not a single one of his Republican colleagues said anything about it.
because right in Norm, they're not going to, and that
Nope.
like that's where we are now. Like that window keeps shifting because every time, and I blame Donald a lot, not Donald,
Yeah.
but the way Donald has been responded to.
Sure.
I blame that a lot for where we are now because Dahlia, it's like if the person who was at the top of your party and who was, and I'll never get over the trauma of this. Just quick, Rachel needs to leave soon. I just want to know if you have any last things you don't need to speak again. I'm so sorry.
No,
I'm just
it's
saying
okay.
that.
It's good, but thank you so much for everything. This was really lovely.
I
And
so appreciate making the effort, and
yeah.
fingers crossed, and we'll keep you posted. And
I still feel hopeful.
Good to see you.
Alex is still hopeful. I'm married to like the biggest
too.
optimist in the face of the world, like ever. And so, but I think it's
For our democracy, man.
well, yeah. But I mean, like I guess as AG said, it's not a red wave, and we need to talk about this. We need to educate people and let them know that this is nowhere near the losses that the incumbent has faced throughout history. So it's a good reminder to say not all is lost. I hate that we're still in this place. It's insane that we're in this place, that we continue to be here. But I think you just see how entrenched, because of a confluence of factors, this ideology is, and it's going to take a very long time to overcome it. But there's a lot of work to do. We just have to keep working. And I know we're all exhausted, but no excuse.
right, but we should get some sleep, and
We
that
should get
includes
some
you.
sleep. I'm going to try to do that.
All right, thanks so much
Good
for
night,
coming.
guys.
I really appreciate it. So if you normalize the fact that the guy in the fucking Oval Office, first of all, that he was allowed to be there, and then the fact that at least 23 women credibly accused him of sexual harassment and worse. And just going to throw this out there, I think he's guilty. And should it surprise us then that Herschel Walker, who held a gun to his wife's head, and I mean, I'm not going to talk about the abortions because that's irrelevant to these people. Who cares if he murdered a few kids if he's going to save millions down the road, right? That's how they think. But the misogyny of it, we cannot. Hey, Julie, we can't kid ourselves, Dahlia, that we can argue
of it.
I'm hearing an echo. I don't know why. Is somebody listening to this on a different channel? Maybe. Awesome. We can't kid ourselves that there's anything we can do about that. Right? My position has always been ignore them because it's a waste of time.
I mean, I think ignoring them hasn't worked, Mary. It's fairly clear that, as you said, that which was disqualifying.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Let me clarify. I'm so sorry. Let me clarify. I don't mean ignore the Walkers and the Donalds I mean, ignore people who, or don't waste our time trying to convince the people who want to vote for them, is what I'm saying.
I guess I would just say this goes to Cliff's point.
You can still disagree with me.
No. I think it goes to Cliff's point, and I missed Brian, but I'm sure he said it, which is like, this is a messaging problem, right? That the reason this is a one-way ratchet that ratchets constantly toward normalizing that which is aberrational and intolerable, and it doesn't normalize going the other direction.
Correct.
I mean, we don't have it going the other way. That what that tells me is that there is no clarion messaging about what progressives and Democrats value, what they stand for, what the ethical principle is here. And so that I think that, you can sort of say, whatever, it's QAnon, it's a cult, they're unreachable. But the larger question is, how is it possible that millions and millions and millions of voters are now tolerating that which they would not have tolerated after January 6th? And where have we failed there? And so I just think this is clearly a media problem. It is clearly a problem of language and discourse and persuasion. And I think we've ceded the ground. We just keep thinking if we pour millions and millions and millions of dollars into races, that stands in lieu of actually having a message and a principled, ask. And I'm just not sure. I mean, I think Jen Taub said when we started tonight, the work is building that thing. And I think that is a media problem. And so what scares me, I opened with this a couple of hours ago. It feels like a million hours ago when I was here last, but I opened with the idea that the thing that was anathema in 2020, which is people saying the election was stolen before it even happened, is now a thing that a third of the candidates are doing. So how did we cede that ground?
Only lost by 80 points. It's a hoax.
How do we reclaim it? And why are we utterly failing to stem that conversation? I guess that's what I would say.
Yeah. And I guess I should rethink what I was saying. I think around election time, I don't think it's worth our effort to try to convince people 2 days ahead of an election that, it's if you're going to vote for Herschel Walker, knowing everything try to convince them that it's bad to hold a gun against them. They don't care. Clearly, they don't care. But I think, Julie, one of the problems that Dahlia is pointing at has to do with the fact that the terms are never defined. It is not a winning argument to say that, it's democracy or fascism if people don't know what democracy means and people don't know what fascism is, right? We need to put it in terms that are actually relevant to people's lives. What will it mean to wake up in a country that is no longer a democracy? And actually, don't even use the word democracy. Because I think partially because the right has so debased language. They call us fascist, communist, Leninist, Marxist, socialists, as if that makes any sense. And that's all.
Not even knowing what it means to say it.
Right. But that's what I'm saying. That's why, for us to use the terms accurately isn't really effective if people don't know. We need to put it explicitly in terms that people understand that are relevant to their day-to-day lives. And, we haven't, I'm not really sure why we haven't done that. Maybe just because it sounds good to say democracy is Democrats are the party of democracy. And it's true, but I don't think it resonates in the same way that some of the arguments, even if they're complete lies, that the Republicans use.
I mean, I agree. I think it's got to be spoken in more concrete terms. And I think that's something that we are constantly missing out on as Democrats. I will say, just harkening back to Herschel Walker, I grew up in Atlanta in the late 70s and 80s, and that you really can't put a price on how much folks valued Herschel Walker during those years. And a lot of those folks are now in their 50s and 60s. And they're going to vote for him. I mean, they're just going to vote for him, nothing else. I mean, it's the football culture. It's hard to explain if you haven't been around it. So I was not on that bandwagon, but I certainly grew up around
Coach
it.
football, and you're absolutely right, young lady. Now, give me 20 laps.
But coming back to the point about what does it mean with democracy, I think one of the other times I was on this show, I mentioned to you that some of my Georgia friends, and I do like to chat with them about politics, but some of my Georgia friends were shocked when Roe v. Wade came down. Their kids were shocked, and they said, why weren't Democrats screaming from the rooftops that Roe was at risk? And I was like, what do you mean? I mean, that the right to an abortion was at risk. Because to me, I hear Roe is, Roe's at risk, or democracy's on the ballot. I mean, to me, those words mean something. There is content to them. I don't know that is the case for everybody. And so when you're throwing around words like democracy's on the ballot, what does that mean? If I'm worried about my gas prices, am I worried about my crime, or sort of the hot issues that Republicans are pushing? We as Democrats have to bring it back to that. Democracy is on the ballot. If we don't have a democracy, your gas prices are going to go even higher. If we don't have a democracy, crime is going to be even higher. Like that, it has to be spelled out, because you and I, hey Jen, you and I and all of us think about these issues all day, every day. But for folks who don't have that luxury, I think it's just got to be spelled out in clearer terms, because they don't have time to sort of think about. It's not that they're not able to think about these issues. They just don't have the time. They're doing 10 million other things. What does it mean that democracy is on the ballot? That's so vague. I'm just worried about why my paycheck, is not taking me as far as it did a year ago.
There's the disconnect. That's the messaging that Dahlia was talking about. Simple fact of the matter is that how bad are some of the candidates that you're running against a seditious party filled with people who are pushing despotism and fascism, and you can't find somebody to beat them?
You know what, though? One of the serious problems here. Wait, Tim Ryan lost?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Well, he's losing.
Yeah,
well,
he's
okay. Just don't give me a-
we're about to lose.
It's not looking good there.
Okay.
It's coming down to Georgia and Nevada for control of the Senate.
It's not looking good in North Carolina. It's Georgia and Nevada.
Yeah, it's not looking good in North Carolina. I hate people so much. Sorry, I do. Because listen, the fact that we're even having this conversation when there are massive amounts of statistics showing that the only party that is good for the economy of the country and for individual Americans is the Democratic Party. Like, it's not even a question. So how the fuck do we keep getting in this position where Republicans can say whatever the hell they want to say, and we have graphs that explicitly lay out the extent to which the Republicans time after time after time fail this country at every level, and here we are. I mean, forget about the hideous quality of the Republican candidates. Forget about the fact that, J.D. Vance is one of the worst people ever born. Forget about the fact that, Herschel Walker has some kind of traumatic brain injury and is just being used cynically by a party that doesn't give a shit about him or people like him. Forget about the fact that, you know what? Sorry. It's just monumentally traumatizing that these facts aren't explicitly stated, and that they're just not part of the narrative. There's nothing arguable here. So look, I'm not an idiot. I understand that what this is always about is the fact that America is a deeply racist country. And unless and until we deal with that, we will always be having these kinds of conversations. But before I have a heart attack or a brain aneurysm or something. I'm just going to say that there is some not terrible news. Fetterman is still ahead in Pennsylvania. Mark Kelly is well ahead in Arizona. The Democrats have won all of the Senate seats that they were supposed to. They're ahead in New Hampshire. So that's all good. Jen, you've had some alcohol, so I'm going to hand it over to you. I'm going to take a quick break because I need to do something. I'll be back in like a minute.
So this is really nice. I've never ever gone on air while I'm drinking a martini. So let me just okay.
Dirty?
Yes, of course. I was out of vermouth, so it's just I had to like add some extra olive juice, olive stuff with what are these? Pieces of garlic. But what I wanted to say that was making me quite happy is what's happening with stuff that we haven't talked about yet, which is state referenda. And you know me, how much I like to talk about taxes. And here in Massachusetts, it looks like, fingers crossed, our the first item on the first ballot question is going to pass. And this is what we sometimes call the millionaire's tax or the fair share amendment. And the way it works, we have a flat tax in Massachusetts, regardless of income, of 5%. And this would create, in addition to that 5%, a 4% surcharge on every dollar of income beginning at $1 million. So those folks would be paying 9% on that above $1 million. It's expected to raise $2 billion a year, which is going to be, according to this referendum, dedicated to schools and roads. Isn't that great?
Crazy.
You know, and I want to say I have a list, but it's not complete. That the guy, what is Daniel's real name? Daniel, forgetting his last name, but he runs now Bolts.org magazine. He's fantastic. And so he has a lot of the different state referenda, but there's, you know, they can't all fit on his list. And I think that I would like to take a look at what's going on. It's, you know, some really good school board candidates and what they stand for, or the various pro-choice constitutional amendments that we're seeing. I think in Michigan, isn't there going to be one? Vermont's already passed theirs. Because to me, you know, I'm horrified. I just don't understand how Tim Ryan could be losing. But and Florida is Floridaing, and on the other hand, we have these lovely people in Florida helping Waj's daughter. So like I try to sort of see, like, you know, yes, there's a lot of disappointing stuff. Yes, it's a better night than we thought. But in terms of the bigger picture, you know, we're in America where people in state referenda vote for $15 minimum wage, a place where people want to amend their constitutional amendments to allow for abortion. Yes, some states don't, but it seems like where the trend is going to have to start thinking much more at the state level, much more locally, at least in those states where maybe you can't get certain candidates to beat the, you know, a guy who wrote a book or something. But, you know, I'm also, can I say the other positive thing? I'm so excited that Lauren Boebert might lose her seat, because that means Marjorie, what did I call Marjorie Taylor Greene by accident on Dahlia the other night? It was, I was dictating into my phone, and instead of calling her Marjorie Taylor Greene, my phone called her Badgering Taylor Greene. Which I think is good. Okay, so I'm supposed to be asking you all questions. Julie, how are you feeling about the night?
I'm feeling, well, I can't remember if I told you. I definitely told Mary. As of yesterday afternoon, I started feeling a little more optimistic. So I feel like that's come to bear a little bit. I'm particularly thrilled about Abigail Spanberger.
Yeah.
That, I mean, you know, being a Maryland, DC, Virginia person, and being somebody who grew up in the government and a mom, like there is something, you know, she's just a rock star. And I was really worried about her and spent some time texting voters on her behalf. And I'm just really relieved, thrilled that she is doing well. So that has been my sort of happy news of the evening. I do feel like Florida is Alabama, and we need to stop pretending that Florida is a battleground state. I felt that way for a few years, and I think we need to be realistic about what it is now. So that's sort of, the bummer news of the evening. But to me personally, I don't feel disappointed by that. I just feel like, yep, this is where we are. Jen, I do agree with you on focusing on local elections. I think it's a lot easier said than done, because all these big ones are much sexier and people are much more willing to donate money and time. And to the extent that, they're still doing that, it's not going to these local folks, and these local folks are putting in the work and the time and deserve it. So you're right. We need to be spending more time there, and the Republicans are better at it than we are as Democrats.
To your point about Florida, because I think Ohio is in the same boat. Because think about it this way: Ohio in Tim Ryan had the best possible candidate, like the best fit. Like, I think in some ways a better candidate than Sherrod Brown for Ohio. Except
Can I say,
of
Mary,
course, that
being here, that they, as an Ohioan, and I agree somewhat. I don't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry, but
but you did.
I did. So I didn't mean to, but it seems like I did.
It's totally
anyhow.
fine.
But the National Party left him. Mitch McConnell put $40-50 million in here. I'm not saying that Ohio. It's absolutely not a down the middle swing state. It's absolutely a +4, +5 Republican state.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just making the point that it's also not. We're not. It's not Florida either. If I'm being honest, DeSantis is going to win by 20 points tonight.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
over
he is.
Charlie Crist, who is a former governor.
Yep.
And a former Republican, who's
Right.
not a lefty.
No, not at all. And look, what my point was specifically about the fact that the Republicans had the worst candidate you could think of, and the Democrats had the best candidate you could think of. And JD, the fact that scumbag is going to be in the U.S. Senate,
I know,
is just. And this is the thing about the Republicans, is that it's not simply that they cheat, lie, and steal. It's that they push the worst of the. They could have gotten a relatively decent human being to fill the illegitimate Supreme Court seat left open by Merrick Garland, but they picked Brett Kavanaugh. Oh, sorry, that was Gorsuch.
Let me
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Let me reiterate something I've said before. This is the cancer of tribalism. We no longer distinguish among and between good and bad candidates. We don't look at people as a broader group of voters and say, this person is a disaster. Even as recently as a decade and a half ago, we did that. We had Senate candidates in places like Indiana who, said terrible things about rape, and that was a disqualifier.
Right.
Now there's nothing you can say that's a disqualifier. It's stunning that a Lauren Boebert could be in a position to lose, even as Marjorie Taylor Greene wins handily, and that a Herschel Walker is in a position possibly to lead, maybe to win, very likely to get to a runoff. Also just tells us that we've lost the capacity as a country to be able to evaluate on the right basis. At least it's gone way down. We do see, obviously, we see these dramatic differences in many states, with governors and senators and Senate candidates. We are getting more split ticket voting this time in some of these states than we've seen in a long time. But it's still, even the fact that Dr. Oz could come relatively close to winning a Senate seat, a guy who, among other things, just a couple of days before the election, talks about all of the Pittsburgh Steelers fans making sure to vote after the game when there wasn't a game. showing he knows nothing about Pennsylvania.
Yeah, so why doesn't football matter as much in Pennsylvania?
That probably did him more to lose the race than anything.
Yeah.
They take their football seriously in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Hey, I do have some news, guys, if you want, from Nevada. I just got off with a poll worker there. The polls closed about an hour ago. There are people still in line. One thing to keep in notice of is that they're only releasing in Vegas, the largest county, Clark County, today's in-person and early voting. So not until Thursday are they even going to release the mail-in votes. And there's three tight races which exit polling say favor the Democrats. And the top ticket of the GOP, they're already arguing. They're going to lay down chattel that's going to give them the Trump argument. They're going to say that they should stop at the early totals because the early totals will favor them, and that it's a big fat hoax if they end up losing after the mail-in vote and it's voter fraud. So there you go. From and one thing I did hear from somebody from Georgia who said it's going to be close, but the one with the brain trauma is going to lose.
John Fetterman?
No.
Georgia. In Georgia.
Oh, sorry. I don't know why. I'm thinking stroke, which is also brain
Wait,
trauma.
Brian, where are you hearing that? Because I'm getting really nervous.
Okay, because
not Walker. No. Sorry, Mary.
Just from a Democrat there in Georgia.
Okay, we don't know.
It's
very, very close, and it shouldn't be. And the fact that it's close is very demoralizing. But I think
we probably won't know for a couple of days in that one either.
I think we need to. One of the things we need to do after, regardless, we know that it's going to be close. Whether Democrats win or lose, it will be much closer than the pundit class or the polls led us to believe. So
polls are fiction.
Totally. But one of the things I think we need to start figuring out is what is the strategy? Do we just say, you know what, Ohio, forget about it. We'll protect Sherrod Brown, but JD Vance is now senator of Ohio, and Ohio's out of reach. Do we just double down on the decreasing number of swing states? And I don't remember who it was. I apologize, but the idea of how much money was spent on Vance in Ohio. Well, I mean, first of all, and I know there's nothing we can do about this, thanks to John Roberts, who may go down in history as the worst Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in modern history. Money, our democracy, if our democracy fails, potentially, it will. Well, yeah, because under no other Supreme Court justice, Chief Justice, has democracy been this threatened. I don't know. I think we can give Tanny. He's given Tanny a run for his money. Let's put it that way. So with all of the money in politics, it's kind of hard to get, because it's just the way it is, right? It's hard to get people to understand just how insane it is. Like, think about it. You have, and Dan Goldman, I mean, I'm happy to have him. He's going to be my congressman. I'm happy to have him, but the guy's worth like $400 million. And I'm not saying he bought himself a seat in the House, but maybe he did. And it shouldn't be allowed, right? That the fact that some guy in California can buy JD Vance a Senate seat. The difference, of course, is Dan Goldman will be a good congressman. JD Vance will be fucking horror show in the Senate, especially if we lose the majority. And we just, once things happen like that, Americans just kind of stop thinking about it. And to me, it's similar to how we fund public education. If you live in a rich neighborhood, you're going to have awesome public schools. But if you live in a city where like this enormous percentage of properties aren't taxed, good luck. it's just the insanity of it all. So again, it's another problem that we're going to have going forward. That we're grappling with so many quite strong headwinds. But I'll stop talking, and Dahlia's going to school us on the Supreme Court like nobody else can.
No, I will say for 30 seconds that one fun game to play is if Shelby County hadn't happened, what would this election look like? If Rucho versus Common Cause, the gerrymandering case hadn't happened, what would this election look like? If the John Lewis voting rights legislation had passed, which it should have, what would this election look like? And I think part of, as you just said, if Citizens United wasn't just the law of the land, what would this election look like? And so when we sit here and talk about like, how did we lose so much ground on all these things? I think that, so much of this is attributable to living in this voting rights world that John Roberts and now this Supreme Court supermajority have constructed, which is constricting the vote and, pouring money into elections and making sure that gerrymandering is a forever thing. And so I just think we have to, when we talk about like, how is it that we're losing and how are the JD Vances of the world winning? That's not just like happenstance. That is a construct that is entirely a function of a Supreme Court that has put a thumb on the scale of how we vote. And so I just think like one really not super fun, but fun game to play is if we had passed like meaningful, voting rights in the last 2 years, so many pieces of what is happening today wouldn't have happened. So that's,
well, one of the reasons, Dahlia,
hang on, Brian. John just joined us. I want to say hi to him.
Hi, I'm on a very quick 5-minute break from Sirius XM. Dahlia was just on my show, and I've come here to poach your guests, Mary. Happy Election Day.
Or am I poaching yours? Happy election
Yes.
day. Anyway.
Listen, happy.
Yeah.
I refuse to show any despair
Yep.
to the fascists and the racists. For an 80-year-old president with a stutter, with record inflation and record gas prices, to be able to have a race, a midterm, his first midterm when he's supposed to get shellacked, and it's this close. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
there's no red tsunami. I'm going to
Yeah.
weep for the losses, but no, man, now we get to watch Kevin McCarthy fuck things up for 2 years. I'm getting popcorn.
Well, that's a really interesting way of framing it, because I've thought about that too. The American people are going to see what it looks like when the worst of the worst, the Marjorie Taylor Greens, the Jim Jordans, the Kevin McCarthys, et cetera, and like it's all of them really, because
Not Lauren Boebert.
hopefully, wait, have they called it?
No.
Not yet, but it's
Okay, but she's definitely down, which is
the
awesome.
comedians are all
Well,
terrified.
there's-
right now.
She is down and out.
Don't touch
She's
that.
done.
Her stronger segment caveat. I would hold the phone on Lauren Boebert for now.
Yeah.
I think it's way overblown. I'll be honest with you. I really do.
Don't take her away from comedians, people. That's all I'm saying. But go ahead. Man.
But well, I think the comedians could live without it, because there's so much else to make fun of. Even if she does lose, but seriously, like I have thought that worst case scenario, they take back the House, but by not too huge a margin. The American people will see just what kind of havoc they'll wreak. But we've seen that before,
Right.
and it still hasn't changed people's minds. Instead, it seems they get inured to the insanity. Is that too negative, or do you think if we lose the House and hold the Senate, that's enough to give us a chance going 2 years out?
I think we're all going to be so grateful that the Republicans have stopped all crime as they've promised, that everyone's going to forget about that and be completely in awe of all their achievements, because they have so many plans that are so well defined. Look, I got to run. I'm going to pop back in later, but they've been proven wrong about everything. And no matter what happens, Trump's still going to be a corrupt liar tomorrow. 2020 still wasn't stolen tomorrow. The majority of Americans still support abortion rights tomorrow.
There you
And
go.
we're going to keep on fighting for the same stuff.
Awesome. Thanks, John.
I'll be
See
back
you
in a
later.
moment. Bye.
Fabulous. See,
Hey,
I
that's
feel
a
better
hard act
now.
to follow.
That was nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, John always makes me feel better.
You he's not wrong.
Nope.
That the big thing that you should take away from this so far, from what I take away from it, looking at the results and talking to people on the ground, is the simple fact that it's not what Republicans, first of all, I hated the term crimson or red wave. I saw the movie Clueless. I think that's a horrible thing to claim that you're going to do. So I'm not even going to touch that. But the simple fact of the matter is they lied about that like they lied about everything else. And it was led by the polls. The media fell for it because we suck. And at the end of the day, the American public didn't fall for it. That's what I take away positive from it, for what it's worth. And I'm an upbeat kind of guy. I haven't even started to drink or defile myself yet, Mary.
Wow. All right. Consider us very lucky.
Yes.
I don't know if it's true anymore, but up until fairly recently, I was a very optimistic person, and I had no reason to be, but I was. I was. And I think part of what I'm reacting to is I need to get over myself, but the injustice of it all, so many people have been seriously harmed in the last 6 years. I mean, obviously 600, but let's keep it, recent. That it's really difficult to be sanguine about results that defy expectations that were potentially would have been much worse. Because I kind of feel like one of the let me put it this way. It's hard to see how we get back, or sorry, not get back, get to where this country needs to be without massive victories. And I said this, as many other people did before the 2020 election. It's not enough for Donald to lose. We need to repudiate the entire Republican Party, and we failed to do that. The Republicans needed to be routed. The losses needed to be just absolutely unassailable, and yet that is not at all what happened. So short of that, because I guess that just seems structurally impossible at this point, what do we do? And I'll just throw that out to anybody who wants to go with it.
I would say you're exactly right.
I wanted to be wrong, Norm.
No, I wish you were wrong. This is the most devastating thing that we face right now as a country, and I just don't see any chances of it changing in the foreseeable future, is that we have one party and one cult. And that cult is a fanatic, religious, anti-Semitic, and racist cult. And it's very hard to move a party away from that. We still have 63% at least of Republicans in the country who refuse to accept that Joe Biden won the presidency in 2020. Nothing has changed that gives us hope that this will be a better party. And, you can't run a democracy that way. And we still have some of these races that are absolutely critical in terms of what could happen in 2024. The governorships, it's looking better for Katie Hobbs now, fortunately, in Arizona. But Nevada, possibly. Certainly, Tony Evers looks better in Wisconsin at this point than Mandela Barnes does, but it's still very, very close. We have many crises ahead. All of the ones that we talked about earlier, the larger schisms in the society, the fact that violence is now an accepted place to turn for so many people, and is rejoiced upon by political leaders. Those are terrible. But if we can't get a responsible Republican Party back, and it's all of them. Susan Collins was out campaigning for Oz. This is what they hold up as their moderate example. What's moderate about Susan Collins? She is all in on the cult. They're all in on the cult.
I agree. I mean, I think we all agree. And I think that one of the sort of overriding themes that has kept me in a funk for the last few months is coming back to this notion that I think hit many of us in November of 2016. Just this idea that our values as Democrats are so wildly different and on such a different plane than half of our country, and to sort of live with that fact, having
Julie, I'm so sorry. I need to interrupt for one
Go.
second because this is insanely huge news. Kathy Hochul is still governor of New York, and the fascist, election denying, anti-women, gun loving Lee Zeldin is not going to be governor of New York. Therefore, he will not be in a position to pardon Donald Trump of any state crimes of which he absolutely will be convicted. So sorry to interrupt,
out
but
of the house too, which is
we needed. Yes, we needed that. We absolutely needed that news.
Absolutely, and thank you for hammering home that point about what he won't be able to do.
Keep going though. You're on a roll. I interrupted you, but I'm sorry. I just needed to.
No. So I mean, just coming back to the reality that we are on such different planes with so many Americans, and how, I mean, I don't want to pull y'all into my misery, but like certainly I just thought of being Americans through 2016. Like it was just, we're all Americans. And now the idea that we are not the same Americans, that we are so different from each other, and that there is so little trust and such a different approach as human beings. I mean, just even today I was doing some voter protection work, and when you do voter protection work, you're sort of getting information from the ground at the polls, and hearing this anecdote about a Republican poll watcher and a Republican voter and a Democratic poll watcher, and all of a sudden the Republican voter walks up to the Democratic poll watcher and calls her a bitch. And I'm just like, this is where we are? Walking up to a woman you don't know and who's trying to do her job, and you're name calling, and you're, it just breaks my heart. I mean, that's part of this. Is it? Yes, Jen.
Oh, apparently they just called. Did you get this? New York for Hochul?
Yes, we've.
Sorry, I had to take off. My headphones were killing me, so I had to.
That's okay.
Wait, that's New York?
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Whoa.
I'm just kidding.
Seriously? Where I live? No way.
She's on that second martini.
No, I'm not. I'm on the first. I thought you were my friends. What happened? To tell you the truth, the USB-C ports on my laptop, there are two of them, but one doesn't work. So the battery was dying. So I had to take the speaker cord.
I think this is bizarrely falls under the category of too much information. But
it does? I thought people
yes, it
to
does.
know what goes on behind the scenes.
Okay.
No?
Well, all right.
Okay.
I think we're gonna have a what do you call it? Outtake show or something. But to Julie's point, yes, exactly. And there's this we talked about this at the very beginning, that election nights used to be celebratory. And you could watch elections with people who are in the other party. And at the end of the night or at the end of the day, you lost, you won, but you were all still friends. And maybe you weren't happy about it, but you knew that everybody still kind of wanted the same or at least, you know, you had the same idea about what America was, for example, and that's no longer the case. Now, at least in my experience, I know that people I used to be friends with who were Republicans and that I used to get along with really well, I know that they're racist, anti-Semitic, homophobes who hate people like me and basically hate anybody who thinks differently from them, and will vote for people who hate the same things they hate. And that is deeply demoralizing, which is something made slightly less painful by the fact that Maggie Hassan won. Hooray. So that's good. You know, the Senate's looking, with the exception of Ohio, you know, the Senate's, let's put it this way, the Senate isn't going to be disastrous, right? And it doesn't look like the House is going to be either. And just, you know, for those who are keeping score at home, that means not only that the media got it very wrong, it means that the media's framing of this election was malpractice. I mean, because by failing to tell people that, you know, slim margins on either side were actually huge victories for Democrats. We never heard that, ever. And the other thing we didn't hear, and I think this is going to be extremely relevant for us starting tomorrow, the fact that this election was treated like a normal midterm. That is one of the most egregious things that the media did, because to pretend that the conventional wisdom was relevant here, or to pretend that the usual midterm narrative could be used honestly, was to ignore the reality of the situation in which we live. You know, I've said this a billion times, forgive me for repeating myself, but it's important. Joe Biden came in to an apocalyptically bad situation, and the media treated the Biden administration as if it were a normal administration that followed another normal administration. Nothing could be further from the truth. So yeah, sure, conventional wisdom tells us that in normal times the party out of power wins in the midterms. That again serves the function of normalizing the fact that the Republican Party is a party of fascists. And fascists should not win the midterms in a functioning democracy. So I think that's our starting point. Stop letting the media and the Republicans get away with a narrative that whitewashes the horrors that have been and continue to be inflicted upon us. I'm sorry. I'm so angry. I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm so angry that we are in this position, and I keep telling myself not to. I swear I've been working on this for 6 years and not particularly successfully. I take this stuff so personally that it's debilitating. But do you guys see it the same way, that we need to seize the narrative and inject some sanity and realism back into what's happening in this country? Ah, shit. Sorry, Sherry Beasley lost in North Carolina.
Yeah. Just, yes.
Jesus Christ. Another great candidate.
Yes.
Anyway.
Yes. So, Mary, I want to just follow on what you said, which is, you know, we talked when I hopped on the call a little while ago, y'all were talking about Democrats and messaging. And I guess part of what frustrates me is that it really also comes back to the media. And, you know, I know we know this, but when you're talking about the media not sort of portraying this as a normal midterm cycle and not calling out the fascists, I mean, part of that also is they're not putting forth, they're not giving airtime to, they're not highlighting the good candidates, the good folks, that the good messaging that the Democrats are putting out. And so, I mean, I understand what drives their motivation, but like Democrats could be screaming from the rooftops, and if nobody is covering it and it's not getting picked up by reporters and on the news shows and by sources of news that people are listening to, it doesn't matter how good our messaging is, because if they push the mute button on it, it's just not being heard. And so they're both failing to, you know, highlight the fascists, or as Jen just put in our little group chat, the insurrectionists and election deniers. They're not just failing to highlight those folks' flaws, they're not giving airtime to the really good future legislators that we could have who are here for everyday Americans. They're just not. And it's very hard to compete when you don't have a microphone.
Yeah. And Norm, I would suggest that it's not like the Republican Party has a great message either. And yet they always get a pass.
You know, one of the things that I find so frustrating is vast majorities of Americans who say that Republicans are better at dealing with the economy, at dealing with inflation, at dealing with crime, when we have mountains of evidence that they're much worse. You look at the economic performance under Democratic presidents and Republican presidents, and we see this all the time. But they at least have been more disciplined in the way they message things. You know, Val Demings ran a good campaign. And I thought in the debate that she did with Little Marco, and I will never call him anything other than Little Marco, where she used the crime issue and the gun issue to put him completely in a flummoxed defensive crouch, that Democrats didn't pick up on that and tried to turn the crime issue back in a different direction was an opportunity missed. I'm not sure it would have made a huge difference in terms of all of these races, but it's time to recapture the framework on so many of these issues. You know, I'll go back to the inflation issue as well. It frustrated the hell out of me that when gas prices first spiked and we saw inflation really picking up, that Joe Biden didn't haul in the top oil company executives and just rake them over the coals and say you're manipulating this for your excess profits to make more money for yourselves, and I'm going to slap an excess profits tax on you, even just to show that you're fighting for the American people. And that's been missing from us, and that's got to change. And you know, in Florida, one thing I want to say about Florida, it actually, there are two sides to that coin. I suspect that one of the main reasons Florida has become more brightly red is that a lot of Republicans from northern states moved down to Florida and have settled there and are voting there. And that made it easier for us to win some of these Senate races in places like New Hampshire and maybe even Pennsylvania. But it's also clear that we have to do work with Hispanic voters. We have to create a different climate and a different message. And that's one other thing that just frustrated the hell out of me. Ron DeSantis, who is a fascist, illegally takes these Venezuelan asylum seekers, fleeing Maduro and hustles them, kidnaps them basically to Florida. Then, of course, spending millions of taxpayers' dollars, sends them up to Martha's Vineyard. A whole lot of those Hispanic voters that are voting against socialism didn't have any idea, because he just kept talking about illegal aliens, that these were Venezuelans who were fleeing. I would have flooded Florida with ads with some of these Venezuelans in Spanish saying, we nearly lost our lives fleeing the Maduro regime, and this is what your governor does for us.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's just no what happens to all these consultants? I mean, they ought to lose their jobs. We need some new people moving in to create a different message framework. It's not all about messaging, but messaging is important.
Well, it's also about respecting your constituents. I mean, one of the things that the Democrats have done, and I have to be honest, I'm kind of relieved that as of tomorrow, we can take the gloves off when it comes to talking about the Democrats.
Yeah.
I think it's counterproductive to do that before this midterm or before the 2020 election, because clearly the Democratic Party there's no alternative. It's the only party that believes in democracy. It's the only party that believes in actually helping people. So, you want to pull your punches and you want to make it about, strategy, not policy. But it's time to, play hardball because we want to make sure that we do better. And one of the failures of the Democratic Party is to speak to Hispanic voters as if they're not this monolithic group. They're not. They're Hondurans and they're Dominicans and they're Puerto Ricans and they're Mexicans, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, especially in a place like Florida, although I have to be honest, and, whoever wants to jump in can jump in. There are a lot of people who moved to Florida are also Jewish. And in addition to being a fascist, DeSantis is a Christian nationalist and an anti-Semite.
Yeah.
So how does that fly? Like, it's very confusing to me. Like, what is it literally just about whiteness at this point? White Christianity? I don't know.
It's Christian nationalists who say great things about Israel and about Netanyahu, so that when the Messiah comes and all of us are going to burn in hell, they can take over the Holy Land.
No, a certain amount of Jewish people, according to Christian nationalists, will be saved, and they will be the bridge to the rapture.
Yeah, Lee Zeldin.
Yeah.
Right. It's sort of like there are always
I haven't had that many edibles.
There are always that number of people who think that they're the ones Donald's still going to be loyal to.
Right. And it's not just Christian nationalists, by the way. Evangelicals, white evangelicals in mass, really treat Judaism as a fetish.
Mm-hmm.
Conservative Catholics.
I navigated these churches for years, and that is what constantly comes up: is this fetishization of Jewish culture, appropriation of Jewish culture, by the way, and this underlying belief that all Jewish people are going to burn in hell. And I wish the Democrats would say that more, would call out the evangelical ideology that quite literally says in churches that Jewish people are going to hell.
Yeah.
And yet we never see that. We never see that kind of rhetoric.
And by placing them in certain areas and giving them Jerusalem and all the actions being taken by these very conservative Christians, they all believe it brings about the apocalypse that much, the rapture that much sooner. Because as the Bible says, when everyone around Israel is fighting Israel, that will be the time that will, signal the end of times. And they're looking to be called up by screaming, yelling, and chanting in tongues, being drawn up into heaven while the rest of us sit and boil in oil. So absolutely.
Mary,
they're batshit nuts.
Sorry, just a quick update. In Georgia, it's almost dead even. Senator Warnock has made up some ground, and I think that's with 86% reporting. So potentially good news.
Here's an update. Edibles will be cheap and legal in Maryland coming after tonight's election. So there is a bright spot in some fashion, form, or otherwise.
I'm probably the only Marylander who doesn't care.
I don't care at all. I could not care less, except I think it's fine, but I don't care.
Fewer arrests.
I think exactly. No.
There you go.
Look,
Yeah.
I
It
think
helps on criminal justice reform.
Really quickly, I
you know
wanted
what,
to tell you
that's-
this for 20 minutes, Mary. I'm not sure if you saw the Sharice Davids one in Kansas.
awesome.
That's
She's
big. That's huge.
A phenomenal LPAC backed candidate, and that's phenomenal.
I'm also watching in Georgia real quick, just so y'all know. Jen Jordan and B win. I think B's not going to win tonight. She was up against Raffensperger, who folks have forgiven because for Secretary of State. She was a tremendous candidate, speaker, inspiring. And so unfortunately, though, I think a lot of moderates were willing to go with Raffensperger because of how he stood up to Trump. But Jen Jordan is, I think, in a closer race tonight against Chris Carr, and that's a big deal for protecting the rights of Georgians to abortion. So I'm hoping she wins her AG race. I'm watching that tonight too.
Okay, good. That's good to know. And the irony there though with Raffensperger is if he had to do it all over again, I bet he wouldn't. But just to make sure that we continue to have our finger on the pulse. Jen Taub has a John Milton quote having to do with hell.
Well, I mean, I'm going to quote him wrong, but we're talking about,
So you're paraphrasing, in other words.
I'm paraphrasing him. It's just amusing to me. I don't know if folks realize, but the Jewish religion and culture don't believe in hell.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't actually exist. I don't know if that seems.
It doesn't actually exist, so that's probably why they don't believe it does.
You may believe it exists. I have no evidence that it does, but I'm not trained to believe it exists.
How could it possibly?
Well, I've sat in on some sermons where I thought I was in hell.
Exactly. Well, that's kind of the Milton quote that mind can make a heaven of hell and a hell of heaven. And, this is the world that I can't imagine. One thing we know is that it seems like our life on earth is finite. And I can't imagine why people.
It seems like it is.
On earth, so miserable.
I think there's definitive evidence.
Well, right. But they believe that there's a hereafter somewhere. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But I'm not opposed to letting people believe what they want to believe, but I'm not that into them deciding that they're going to create a belief system and then we're going to burn in the hell that they created that we don't even believe in.
I know.
I mean, it's just, Jews have been the ultimate resistors for like 2,000 years. And I'm just going to say, give up. I mean, we keep chugging along and they keep trying to kill us and we say, what's for dinner? And that's how I do it.
Jen, they believe that their idea of freedom of religion is that they're free to impose their religion on us. That's it.
Yeah, and you look, there are a couple of very disturbing trends that are fairly long-standing, but that are increasing in how troubling they've become. Christianity is on like practically every friggin' ballot. I remember, I think it was in, it might have been one of the Democratic presidential debates in 2008 or leading up to the 2008 election. And one of the questions was, what was your favorite Bible verse? I'm like, why is that even a question? And what was infuriating, like if I had, by some bizarre chance been asked that question on that stage, I would have said, can you please ask me what my favorite amendment of the Constitution is? Because I'm not talking about the fucking Bible.
Right. Because
last I checked, there's separation between church and state. There no longer is. Okay. So that's a trend that's quite concerning. Especially since, as I think Jen pointed out a week or two ago, in a different context, that like all of the hate crimes that are increasing exponentially are directed against portions of the population that are like 5% of us. It's very disturbing. The other weird trends seem to be that, okay, think about what the Biden administration has been able to accomplish despite the razor thin margins it has, and the fact that most of the time they have 48 Democrats in the Senate, not 50. So just to focus on two that you would think would be, or three that you would think would be the most galvanizing. One, college loan forgiveness. Two, the poorly named Inflation Reduction Act. And I mean, this doesn't have anything to do with the Biden administration, and it's a bad thing. It's what the Supreme Court did vis-a-vis reproductive justice, which is to say they eliminated the ability for us to have reproductive justice in this country. Given, is that why it's close? I mean, I would think that would be why it should have been a blue tsunami. So going forward from here, is there anything that we can do to make things like that have more electoral power? I don't know, if we, again, I hate drugs of all kinds. I think they should be legal, regulated, and taxed because it's safer, right? I still hate them.
Violence out of it too.
And personally, I don't, doesn't mean anything to me if they're legalized, but I think it's better for people who partake. If we legalize, what's that drug that I really hate called pot? If pot were legalized at the federal level, would that be something? I mean, I don't know. It just seems like there's so many things that Democrats have done that would have motivated their constituents, and yet, I mean, can we put it down to voter suppression, voter subversion, and gerrymandering? Is that what we're dealing with? Although that doesn't explain Ohio.
But the overall messaging has been really bad. It's been god awful. It's been scattershot all over the place. There's been no unified, this is why we're running as Democrats. This is what we want to do next.
Charlotte, can I ask you a quick question though?
Yeah, sure.
In that context? And it just sort of reminds me of when people used to say, and sometimes people still do, seriously, you cannot talk about the 2016 the 2016 election without people saying, well, Hillary was a bad candidate, and which makes me want to kill them, first of all. And secondly, my response to that is always, compared to whom? So that's my, the Democrats' messaging has been bad. Granted, but also compared to what?
Well, let's look at the 92 election, right? Clinton runs on the economy and he just hammers that home again and again and again. Even when some folks didn't think the economy was going to be a winning message, he just kept going with it. Let's look at 2008. It was Barack Obama talking about hope, talking about getting, out of Iraq, talking about the things that were pretty central to people's minds. Can anyone here summarize in 20 words or less what the Democratic Party's main message to voters was? 20 words or less. You know what? No, that's too easy. 10 words or less.
No. But again,
that's
my
a
question
problem.
is,
That's a problem.
What was the Republican message? What was the Republican message?
Republican message was, these people are trying to oppress us with their personal beliefs. We're going to stop them from oppressing. We're going to stop the Democrats from canceling America. That was literally their message. Democrats are going to cancel America. We're going to stop them from doing that. That was it. That was the whole thing. And Democrats, instead of saying, no, that's fucking ridiculous. And
our message should have been freedom, 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 freedom,
There you
freedom.
go.
Yeah, because that works better than democracy.
Freedom of choice. I mean, we go freedom to have your kids learn the truth. Freedom, freedom, freedom. Debt freedom, freedom.
And,
could have been,
right.
But no.
And Charlotte, your point is really well taken. And I mean, part of what my response is just frustration because there you are. Sorry. Everybody switched places. Is that once again, the Democrats always have to be better, because the Republican message is fucking lie, but it hits the dopamine centers of the brain or something, I guess. So yeah, but I agree with you. The Democrats shouldn't have been that hard.
We also have to show up. I mean, gerrymandering and redistricting is a huge issue, but we also have to show up. And so what I'm looking to see, and I really haven't paid attention, is how well we showed up tonight. I certainly think we showed up better than in prior midterms. But the amount of money, time, and energy that Democrats put into getting out the vote is astonishing. It's astounding. And, certainly if we had reforms like automatic voter registration and, other ways to get more of us, registered to vote and got rid of some of the voter suppression efforts. But just getting us out to vote is a Herculean effort.
Mhm.
And that takes money away from ads, which takes money away from getting our message out. I mean, you have to preserve so many resources for those GOTV efforts. And it's an issue. I mean, if we all voted as we all feel and as people, if pressed with a microphone up to their face, as they're getting ready for bed every night in every bedroom in America, like, we would win. It's getting folks out is a huge issue. And it's just going to continue to be, it's just something that we have to continue to work on. I did want to flag, just as a good news point, that it looks like Kentucky rejected an abortion ban, one of their constitutional amendments. And so I think, that's a good message. I think it's a good state to be getting that message from. And so when we have wins that show the will of the people, I think it's important to celebrate those as well as some of the disappointments of the evening.
And maybe, Mary, I would just say, I think that fear is such a huge motivator. And you had, one party running on just absolutely fanning the flames of, socialism, crime, grooming your children, critical race theory in the schools. And then you had another party who literally fears existentially for the future of one person, one vote and democracy. And yet somehow wasn't able to message that, do you want women to go to jail for miscarriages, and utterly failed to convey the just extreme risk. And I think it goes to lots of stuff we've talked about on this show before about, how when women express fear, it's deemed hysteria, and how when, progressives express fear, it's like, oh, you're using the word fascism and authoritarianism. But I just think this is such an interesting cultural moment where, one side was manufacturing fear largely based on nothing. And the other side genuinely is in fear of another January 6th. And that doesn't get communicated. Again, we've talked about messaging the whole night, but I just think I am afraid in ways that I have not been in prior elections about vigilantes and about, guns and about the safety of women and their ability to move through the world without being incarcerated for a miscarriage. That is existential. And yet this didn't feel like an existential election. On the other side, it was existential because of an imaginary crime wave.
That is such a good point. And I think that the Republicans have done this for a long time. They understand in a visceral way that fear is extraordinarily motivating. It's a very powerful weapon, but it's uncomfortable. Fear is a very uncomfortable emotion. Nobody wants to feel afraid. So what they do is they transform it into rage, because that's rage is sort of motivating. Fear paralyzes you. Rage motivates you. Democrats seem not to want to tap into these things. And Jen, that has been one of the great ironies, and we have talked about this fairly often. We have so many reasons to be afraid and angry. Legitimate. So I should say legitimate. And on the right, it's just fear of the other, right? It's fear of it's literally imaginary fear. Fear of Black people who should be afraid of you guys, white Republicans. It's fear of immigrants who literally are doing jobs that you wouldn't that you have no interest in doing, and who are much more law-abiding than white Americans are. It's fear of the LGBTQ community, which is just gobsmacking, considering how much violence there is against the LGBTQ plus community, and on and on and on and on and on. I mean, it is just fear of becoming irrelevant. And I mean, the real fear underlying all of that is fear of having to give up their white privilege, basically. Fear of no longer being in the majority. So, Jen, it's like, we need to become comfortable with making our side uncomfortable, and helping people tap into the reasons why, and the ways in which we should be afraid and angry. I mean, yes, I'm afraid. I mean, I'm not afraid that something is going to happen to me personally at Haywaj. Because I am protected by certain privileges. But I mean, I'm afraid for other people. I'm afraid that I'm going to lose what I thought this country was, or could be potentially. And more than anything, though, I'm really, really fucking angry.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a way to communicate with moral authority the kind of anger you feel and that we all feel. And, examples include the way Mallory McMorrow from Michigan did, saying, I'm a mom, and how dare you come into these schools and say what you're saying. It's what Barack Obama, when he was back in circulation these past few weeks, in order to speak to the Democratic base and to even speak to independents, you, without doing the manipulation and the inventing, making these fears materialize just to get people to be so angry and fearful that you say, and now I have the solution, vote for us and we'll stop, the monsters or whatever you're saying. That's not credible. It's not truthful. It's not the way we have to be. Instead, there are really actually things in front of us that are problematic and scary. And talking about that, erasing our history, taking books out of libraries, that diminishes our freedom. It dumbs down our kids. We can tell the truth about the things that we should be fearful about. And I'm not sure why that's not happening, but I don't know if there's any there. In other words, we keep imagining, I don't know whose job it is. Like, I don't know enough about political parties. Like, I'm a political person. I speak about issues I care about. I know individual members of Congress because I'll be like interviewing them, but I'm not a joiner kind of person in terms of political parties where you've got to like work your way up through things. So I get the sense from everything I know about the corporate world or any kind of system of, of people working together, is that in order to rise through the ranks of any large bureaucratic organization, you've got to go along to get along. You've got to get things through a committee, and everyone is going to like nod in their head at the person who has more power so they can rise. And then everything becomes kind of pablum and doesn't really stand out. That's just my theory about organizational behavior in the world. And so I think the question is, when things stick, who is the person? Who is the brains in the Democratic Party or the in charge in the Senate? Or who's the person who's supposed to say, holy shit, Mallory McMorrow, that I get that makes a lot of sense. Like, who's looking at these? Who's going to look at who voted and who didn't and what messages worked where and sort of say, here's the plan. And is there anybody who does that, Mary, or is it us? And
Liz
we have
Smith.
power?
Liz Smith has been excellent, been an excellent communicator. She was the one who led Buttigieg's campaign. She was the one who took over the reins for Malik Memorial. She is a fucking great communicator, but she is continually ignored by parts of the party who are too scared of their own shadow to do what is needed to be done in leading the public to rational conclusions. Because unfortunately, much of the Democratic Party, and by the way, Mary, I think you said this earlier about gloves being off after, because I've held my tongue quite a bit over this past 6 months over Democratic missteps. Not going to be holding my tongue for the next couple months.
No, you know what?
Should.
Jen and Waj and I were talking about this, and I know Julie and Dahlia need to head out soon. So I'm just going to say this, and I'm going to give you guys your last word for the night. But we were basically saying for the next year, we are going to be confrontational. We are going to be fighting for our position and pushing it on the powers that be, because what they've been doing has not been working. And it's time for new voices and new energy and a new take. So Dahlia.
No, I agree. I think that like it's just not a message to say, give us money, we're workshopping some stuff. Like that's just not gonna inspire anyone. And give us money, we're workshopping some stuff is, I feel like it's largely what I've heard. And like I said, you know, I think you're like running against the headwind of an increasingly normalized fascist authoritarian administration, you know, at every level, things that were, we've talked about this all night, unthinkable 2 years ago, unthinkable 4 years ago, you know, that abusers of women, that, you know, purveyors of like violence are now not disqualified, they're actually attractive. And that's the way this is heading. And the idea that our response to that is like, we're workshopping it, give us money, is just not a message. And so I don't know. I mean, I'm psyched to hear like you, Mary, and you, Charlotte, like explain like when the gloves come off, like what the actual message is. Cause I just know this is so flaccid and uninteresting and not meeting the moment. And, you know, I just think like if we can't communicate in an election when it is in fact authoritarianism that is on the ballot, that was on the ballot, then we are losing. And I just shudder to think of what comes next.
Totally agree with you. Go to sleep, feel better. Thanks, Dahlia. Julie?
Yeah, I have thoughts. I could do a whole episode with you on how we need to revamp how campaigns are run. But you know, one thing I want to raise to your point about messages and who decides, you know, these pollsters who are frequently wrong are constantly taking the temperature of voters throughout the lifespan of a campaign. And so when book banning is happening and a candidate wants to talk about book banning and a pollster does a poll and book banning doesn't poll well that week, it's out. It's off the table. You can't talk about it as a candidate. And so it's when you talk about, when anyone talks about like the powers that be and the DNC, it's not the DNC making this decision. It's these pollsters who are giving guidance. It's 20-somethings who are, you know, the biggest voices on campaigns, advising candidates what they're supposed to say and what they can't say and what is too dangerous to talk about given the state that they're running in and who the voters are. And so it's not really honest. They're constantly, candidates, it seems to me from my impressions, are being clamped down from their messaging. And that's not a DNC issue or a Joe Biden issue. I mean, it's much more granular than that. And I think that we as Democrats are just, really super careful, and it's not to our benefit. And we see it, how we're constantly shooting ourselves in the foot with how we hold our folks accountable in a way that clearly, to your point about the candidates that the Republicans have put forth, who are, abusers and worse, are given a free rein to keep going forward. And so, anyways, if you ever want to talk about that offline or on, I would love to talk about campaigns and how we need to rethink them.
We're going to be talking about everything, and yeah, the Tuesday strategy sessions are going to continue, but again, gloves off, and it's really going to be about shaping the next 2 years and fighting for what needs to happen, and not being fucking polite anymore. So, Julie, thank you. I know it's late, but I so appreciate your being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
And,
It's so good to see and chat with all of you. Waj, I'm sorry I didn't get to hang out more. See you soon.
So nice
Bye.
to see you, Julie.
Bye, y'all.
Okay, guys, I want to hear everybody, like, we're unleashed. We're off the chain, or whatever the fuck they say.
Unleashed!
I don't know.
I just wanted to say that.
But that was weird, but awesome. But before we do that,
it just reminded me of He-Man, like He-Man with his sword finally.
Before we, I hear your wildings in the background. Before we do that, though, I need to get more water and Advil. So if you guys can maybe catch people up on not results, but like what's happening in, like Wisconsin, et cetera, I will be back in less than a minute.
Can I just say I'm hearing about I'm like just peeking in and seeing that the New York Times Needle apparently has readjusted, and or maybe, I'm not watching MSNBC, I'm just looking at the news on my phone, but apparently Ron Johnson is down to about a 56% chance.
Yeah, it's wild. It's very close. And also some of these, this is my Newberry. I'm a good parent, I promise. All my kids are awake because we're in Florida partying. And I did my part, brushed their teeth, put them in pajamas. But this is how it's going to be. But the red wave that we were discussing earlier hasn't showed up yet. And it is almost midnight, folks, which means that the Republican polls that were flooded the last 2 weeks were wrong, which means, as we were discussing, that when Democrats ran on those issues of protecting democracy and abortion, kitchen table issues that mobilized a bunch of folks according to the exit polls, and a lot of these extremist candidates either lost or barely won. I mean, I want to say this. Tim Ryan ran an excellent campaign in Ohio. I wish it would have been J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance unfortunately won, backed by Peter Thiel and millions of dollars. But it should have never been that close, even in Ohio. And even now with Ron Johnson and Mandela Barnes. So let's see what happens. It seems like the needle still pointed to Republicans taking control of the House, but not in a wave. And the Senate, ladies and gentlemen, might come back to Georgia in a runoff. It's going to be wild the next couple of days. And I know Charlotte wants to be unleashed. So,
and you were saying, Charlotte, but maybe you know this, that the runoff would be in December, not January this time.
They moved it up a month. Yeah. The Republicans moved it up a month to December. So we'll be getting that campaign quite quickly.
Did I miss anything?
No.
We're talking about, even Arizona right now, Hobbs. I'm very surprised that she has the type of advantage that she does have over Carrie Lake.
Very surprised, but very relieved, at least.
Relieved, but the reason
Tentatively.
this is because Carrie Lake was groomed by the Republican Party to be a potential running mate for Trump. It's something called gender washing, right? She's seen as the more soft, feminine, palatable version for the type of extremism that Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's also in the running. They said, "Oh, maybe we can launder it through Carrie Lake." And the fact that she might lose, that'd be a huge win for democracy, but also a huge win for Arizona. Also, Kelly's up right now. The fact that Maggie Hassan won, even though Bulldog had a tight race there. The fact that Zeldin, thank God, lost. Thank God in New York. And I think in Ohio, didn't Democrats?
Landsman won in Ohio. Yep.
I mean, this is, again, with the historical context, folks, I know even if Republicans take the House, people will be depressed and we're going to have a deadlocked Senate, or maybe 50, 49, 51. If you just lean back for a second and look at the historical context that we've been talking about, this should have been a red tsunami, or any other figurative language you want to use for a catastrophic wave. The fact that that has not matriculated, I think Charlotte said something earlier, it bodes well in a strange way for 2024, assuming we still have democracy.
Oh no, it absolutely does.
Well,
and the only thing I'll say, and then Jen, if you have a quick comment, but I want to get to Charlotte, is that the only reason it should have been a red tsunami is because, once again, the events of 2020 and 2021 were normalized, or were taken out of the equation. I mean, think about what was not on the ballot in this election. I mean, I was, I pay attention to these things, and I remembered it was yesterday, the day before. I was like, oh my God, Donald Trump stole thousands of classified and top secret documents, and the Republican Party is totally cool with it. And that's not even been an issue in this election. So it should have been a blue tsunami, quite honestly, but only if things had been fair and properly presented to us. But Jen, you have a quick comment?
Yeah, I mean, the expectation was that they would take the House, and maybe we would keep the Senate. We're still sort of in that same place, but if they do run the House, and we lost Mary, and they put in Marjorie Taylor Greene to be head of the House Oversight Committee, and she shows her full glorious self, I don't think it's gonna be so great. And I think that gives us something to run against. I mean, I would rather have control of both chambers so we can actually get legislation done. But if we don't have the House, they can act like fools. We can run against that, and we can be putting members of the judiciary in the Senate if we have real control there, and do other appointments, and eliminate the debt ceiling. There's a lot of stuff we can do if we run the Senate, and if they're running around like idiots in the House. And again, it gives us something to run against, as opposed to, you had 8 years. What did you do? We can say, do you want more of what's going on in the House?
Yeah, exactly. Charlotte.
Yeah, no, Jen has a good point. I think I'm just worried about, I'm worried about what they're going to do legislatively over the next term. I want to be clear. Tonight is a good night. It could have been much, much worse than this. I completely agree. I am weirdly a little happier than I thought I would be by this time this evening. But what they're going to do next is they're going to, two things. First of all, Republicans are going to press their advantage wherever they can legislatively. And second, I have a feeling the Democrats are going to look for a couple weak points to concede as a way of softening the ground for 2024. Which to me means that trans rights are pretty vulnerable right now. And I can see a world in which trans people are kind of thrown under the bus in the next 2 years as a way of making a peace offering to moderates or to some folks in the Republican Party. And I realize that there are folks who think that's not going to happen, but we didn't vote on the Equality Act this term, even though we had both majorities. We didn't vote on marriage equality in the Senate this term, even though we had both majorities. LGBTQ people, I think, are going to take a back seat in policy for the next several years, because Republicans have effectively framed us as predators and pedophiles and whatever the hell else. Political violence, I think, is going to be far more sanctioned than it has been, especially against LGBTQ people, especially against queer people of color. And what is tragic about all this is that the Democratic Party overall, not everyone. I mean, President Biden has done a pretty good job. Folks like Senator McMorrow have done a good job. But much of the Democratic Party, and especially in the House, have either avoided LGBTQ issues entirely so as not to draw fire, or they have just completely failed to effectively message on LGBTQ issues, which, by the way, is not that difficult for people willing to make an effort. But what we've seen time and time is, again, especially from a lot of House Democrats, is this inability or this unwillingness to effectively message on LGBTQ rights. That's going to make marriage equality vulnerable. It's going to make conversion therapy, the effort to prevent conversion therapy from happening vulnerable. And it's going to mean that LGBTQ people in at least 36 states in this country, 36 states, are still vulnerable to violence and discrimination in housing, employment, even employment with the Bostock ruling, even employment, credit, public accommodations, jury service, education. So, yes, it is a good night. It's a lot better than I thought it was going to be. But if I'm a trans person right now, and I am, but if I'm a trans child looking at all this, I'm looking at a country that's not going to protect me for the next, for the foreseeable future, and that's worrisome.
And it's an unforced error the Democrats continue to make. They've done it with immigrants. They've done it with immigration policy. They've done it with Black people forever. And it's unspeakably cruel, and that should be enough of a reason not to do it. But two, I believe it's also strategically stupid. I think it fails to recognize who comprises the Democratic base. It fails to recognize where we should be and could be headed as a country. And it fails to recognize where our power comes from. And that is one of the distinctions that I think we have failed to make, or have conceded for some bizarre reason. One of the most successful Republican arguments has been, we are as cruel as you want to be. With us in power, we'll be cruel. We give you permission to be cruel. As long as you're cruel to the right people. Awesome. And the Democrats had a really simple task there, which was to say, we are the opposite of that. We don't believe that that cruelty is something that is acceptable, and we certainly don't believe that makes for a country that's inclusive and that's worth living in and supporting and fighting for. It's like, and again, I don't mean to keep bringing him up because I fucking hate him, but that is one of the things that Donald did. I don't give him credit for much. She has beautiful hair. I don't give him credit for much because he's really just a symptom of a long-standing disease. But what he did do was show his party that, or convince his party anyway, that cruelty is strength and kindness is weakness. We should have made that. We should have fought back vociferously against that, and we have failed to do so. Waj?
Can I connect the dots right here and to show where there was a weakness and there can be learning opportunities? Let's go to Virginia, where I now live.
Yes.
About a year and a half ago, I wrote an article for the Daily Beast telling them that the anti-CRT campaign is mimicked after the 2010 anti-Sharia campaign that was launched and created by Republicans to feed hysteria right before the midterm elections. I said it's the same playbook. I broke it down, and I tried my best to warn the Democrats that you have to take it seriously. I saw the writing on the wall. Everyone said, Terry's going to win. He's going to waltz in. I'm like, you guys aren't paying attention. I live here. I'm telling you, suburban parents are being swayed by this. There's no counter message. Where is your counter message? We're just going to say Terry McAuliffe, you know him, Trump. I'm like, the education issue. I'm talking to educated Democratic parents who think that their teachers are going to transform their child into an atheist transgender activist who hates white people. What's the counter message? Nothing. Now, ladies and gentlemen, last week, Glenn Youngkin, unfortunately, is our governor of Virginia. Suburban parents and white women, a majority of them, helped give him the vote. I'm sorry to say, but that's the facts. And they just shut down the hotline for anti-CRT tips because there were no CRT tips, because it was a manufactured issue. And once he got elected, they're like, oh, look, they're not transforming our child into a transgender activist. Oh, and they shut down the hotline. The hotline, literally, that was created with the manufactured fear against transgender kids, Muslims, Black, like all of us, right?
Can I just say, it's great. I think it's good if kids want to be transgender activists. I mean,
but what I'm saying is the fear, right, was that they will transform your kid and make them into not transgender activists. They'll make them into transgender, anti-white, yada 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 yada. That's the fear,
right? And
we would say if your kid is, so the counter message was non-existent. Terry McAuliffe never hit back and said, "So what if your kid is transgender? Don't you want to?"
Or saying we support children where we are. We don't try to either make them transgender or make them heterosexual or make them
about history,
or make them cisgender or make them. Children are becoming who they're going to become as young people and adults, and we should be not forcing them to be what they're not. Like that
was also, if you guys remember, the anti-1619 project as well, right? So all of it was just nonsense. And Mallory McMorrow, someone mentioned her, and the reason I'm connecting the dots is when they attacked Mallory over the same conspiracy theory, right? And she saw LGBTQ kids in her community being attacked. She said, enough's enough. I'm a mother. She got up. She responded directly to the hateful comment. She not only responded to it and shot it down, then she pivoted the messaging and said, as a straight white Christian mom, these are my values, and I believe that these vulnerable children have a space in our community, and we should accept them. And this will not be a space for hate or homophobia. That clip went viral. She articulated it. She communicated it. She connected the dots, and now she's a rising superstar. That's the message that we are so desperately yearning for, that hopeful message that expands the tent and says, these are who the Republicans are. I'm going to punch them in the mouth, and then I'm going to show you another narrative and vision of America where all of our kids can be the co-protagonists of the narrative. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is if you look at the poll right now, you know, this hyped up, hateful anti-transgender fear, anti-CRT fear, and again, immigrants and crime, like freaking clockwork, you would think Democrats would wake up one day and have a counter message to it, is dominating, right? And the reason why they don't do it, Mary, and the last thing I'll say is because Democrats are so terrified of losing this white voter that instead of coming out with that forceful message that Mallory and others show them they cow down. And like Charlotte said, they throw us under the bus. I'm a Muslim, happened to our communities. They ignore us completely. They say, come vote for us, but we won't date you publicly. We'll take you to this nasty restaurant in the cellar. But they have good soup. You like soup? You'll get a warm soup. But we won't date you publicly. And what happens instead is our communities say, what have you done for us lately? And our kids are marginalized. So I hope this, in the next 2 years, going up to 2024, on crime, you can hit the Republicans, you can hit Donald Trump, you can hit the violent insurrectionists. On LGBTQ kids, Mallory's shown you the way, where you can create a big tent and bring in people who are skeptical and say, listen, kids will be kids, you can have your values, but I think we all agree that our children should be safe and secure and learn about everyone. People are like, yeah, you're right. And then also on race. If you do that, you have a winning strategy, Mary, but you need fighters willing to step up and fight for our communities and to articulate and communicate this message effectively, like a Mallory McMorrow, or like Obama showed them the way just last week when he hit them on Social Security. Sorry for my rant, but
no,
that's
what we're here for.
I was in Virginia and I saw it happen in slow motion, and it just killed me.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that Democrats need to do is stop deluding themselves that the media is a neutral actor here, because one of the things that was, I mean, not surprising, but still kind of amazing about the Virginia gubernatorial race between Youngkin and what's his name, McAuliffe, is that Youngkin was not called a racist once during that entire campaign, even though his entire campaign was based on racism. So, you know, just a couple of quick updates. I know it's very early days. It's like only 40% of the vote in Arizona, but still, both Fincham and Lake are losing. The Republicans for Secretary of State and governor, respectively, are losing by double digits.
Oh my gosh!
I think so, like 11 and 13%, respectively. So, you know, again, 48% in. There's ways to go, but that's good because Arizona. That, I mean, if we had lost Arizona, and again, I don't know, but I think Kelly's in very good shape. I don't think it's been called yet, but he's in very good shape. And you know, losing. Oh my gosh, Kelly is up by 18.
Wow, how much is in, Mary?
Only 50%, but still, that's and you know, that's the problem with looking at newspapers. I'm looking at the Times simply because I'm a New Yorker, and even though I hate the New York Times now, I grew up with it, so it's sort of my default. I understand it. I like how they lay everything out. You know, they don't give you information about where the remaining votes are coming, so that is a slight disadvantage. But still,
but I was looking somewhere else, and it seemed like a lot of the vote in Georgia was still to come in from Fulton County, but I don't know where I was looking. So that's encouraging.
Well, that does seem to be the case.
I know you're talking about a different state, but I'm just thinking.
But it's the same thing, right? It does seem to be the case that the later vote tallies come in from the more densely populated districts. So, you know, I like in Georgia, it seems like Fulton County is always the last one to come in. I mean, I don't know.
There may be so many precincts, right, within a particular area.
Yeah, it's just obvious. There's so many more votes to count. And speaking of Georgia, it is 89% of the vote in. Walker is leading by 0.02. And the Libertarian has 2%, which means that, you know, obviously worst case scenario, Warnock loses. But
that's a lot of missing vote, though, you know.
No, but that's what I'm saying. Like if Walker wins with fewer than 50%, typically the Libertarian votes. I'm sorry, I just ruined my whole. I just realized where I was going, and I don't want to go there.
You're doing great.
No, because I was like, oh, so that'll be no. It would actually be good for Walker, but maybe it will give people to come to their senses. I don't know. I think there's going to be a runoff in Georgia. Am I wrong?
I don't know. I think, you know, it depends where this vote. Like, I have not looked at a map. I'm not from there, but I would have to see where, you know, where's the missing vote? How much is it supposed to lean? And do the math. And like, if I weren't on your show, I'd be sitting there like with my calculator and like looking at the TV and trying to predict it. But like, you know, there's no point in that because it might be, I don't know if they have automatic recount or if there's going to be complaints about a recount. We've got a lot. I don't think we're going to have an answer on Georgia anytime soon.
It's going to be wild. It's going to be wild for the next month in Georgia. I think right now what we're seeing is probably going to go to a runoff. And you're
That's what I already
see
said, yeah.
Bad shit, conspiracy theories, armed folks. Like it's going to be wild, wild west in Georgia. But Georgia might save the day for us.
Well, it might be that we still have, I mean, what is the state we're looking at? Is it, I was looking at the 3 states, North Carolina.
It's Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia. Those are the big 3 now. We need
in Arizona.
Well, Pennsylvania too, because we don't know about Pennsylvania yet either.
Projections right now are Fetterman's looking really good.
Oh, okay, good. I haven't checked in a bit.
So what's going on with Arizona again? How close is Lake?
Kelly's up 2.7% with 60% of the vote in, according to NYT. I think Kelly's going to be okay.
I think Kelly's gonna be okay. Again, last I checked, there was only 40% of the vote in, but still, Lake is down 11 or 13%, and so is Fincham, the psycho Secretary of State candidate on the Republican side. So that's good.
What
Can
about
change.
Nevada?
I haven't checked.
It's close. It's razor thin, but I if I had to guess right now, I think she's going to pull it out. I think she's going to win, but it's razor close.
So you're all saying everything points to Georgia is what you're all saying at this point.
Not necessarily. Just say no, because if we win Arizona, Nevada, and Pennsylvania,
we're going to win Arizona. The two states that are in question, in my humble opinion, at this point, are Nevada and Georgia. We need to win one of those, at least one.
Right
of
now,
those.
the Times is predicting another 50-50 Senate with.
Well, Nevada, the Dems have overperformed in Nevada, so barely. So the fact is that there's a slight edge there. I mean, it's close, but we might hold on to Nevada. I mean, which is amazing. I mean, I'm amazed by some of these pickups, like all across the board, and the fact that these have held on, which goes back to our point. If you communicate the threat, if you make it into a kitchen table issue, it becomes a kitchen table issue. Abortion rights is healthcare rights. Abortion rights is economic rights. Freedom and protection. I mean, the fact that the protection of democracy is a top 5 issue.
You can't see. This is what I want you to say. Freedom is the issue. Freedom versus fascism.
Yeah.
That's
period. That's what it is.
Freedom and family.
You know, I actually I tweeted this because I was trying to figure out how to put it in terms that are like stark and that don't require defining terms, right? So I just wrote, if you want to protect your rights and freedoms and those of other Americans, vote for Democrats. If you don't give a shit about the rights and freedoms of other people, vote for Republicans.
Did I retweet that already? I think I might have.
You should have, if you. No, but seriously,
I'm hopping right over there right now.
Thank you so much. But you know, I think obviously it's Twitter, so it had to be short. But you know, I think we can work with that. But one question I have for you guys, because it's a problem we need to grapple with. What do we do now? Again, hopefully we'll win in Georgia, and hopefully we'll win in Pennsylvania. And I'm sorry to say I don't know enough about Nevada. I don't know enough about the Republican running in Nevada against Cortez Masto, but you know, we lost in Ohio. What do we do when it seems that candidate quality doesn't matter? In other words, Democrats can have the best friggin' candidate, and the Republicans can have absolutely the worst. And it's we either win very narrowly or we lose. What is up with that? Because seriously, think about it. I mean, this is something that should keep us up at night. Like, imagine if they had a halfway decent candidate in any of those states, right?
It's sports for some people. Like you know, when you're from Detroit, your football team really is, you know, is really college football. It's really the Michigan Wolverines, but because your football team is also the Lions.
How does that explain JD Vance or Oz?
It's because if you're a Republican, that's your team.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Mary, Detroit Lions are a historically cursed team. They're really bad, just to let you know.
But I love them.
I don't know what that means, but good.
No, it's not good. I feel bad for Detroit Lions fans. I'm sorry. But you did beat Aaron Rodgers last week, so.
But, you know.
See, I'm sorry. I just need to make this point because, you know, we're planning on having a nerd off at some point, and I don't think Watch understands the degree to which his participation in football Twitter puts him at a serious disadvantage for winning the
I
new
had to
golf.
help fellow nerd Jen because she was making an exquisite analogy, and as soon as she said Detroit football team, I saw your eyes glaze over, so I had to connect the dots for you.
And you still failed because I have no idea what you're talking about.
I'm gonna get the Milton fucking question, and you're gonna get some easy sports thing. I know how it's gonna be.
Well, again, we need to define what nerd means. There are so many different. It's a multitudinous thing.
But Mary, what you were saying is, I'm just to stick on it for a second. It's how every single mainstream institution and the majority in America keep bending the knee to a bad faith, whining victimhood of the right-wing minority that always works the refs. It happens in politics. It happens in corporate America. In media, I think I've shared this story before, but I will share it again because I was thinking about it today. Let me show you how lopsided it is. And when you do this both sides framing, why Republicans are able to get away with the most extreme comments, but Tiffany Cross makes a comment against Florida and she gets axed unceremoniously. A year and a half ago, I was auditioning. Well, they asked me to audition for some political roundtable show, okay? The producer told me it's been so hard to find a sane Republican. I'm like, what's the standard? This is what she told me. We're simply looking for someone who believes that Joe Biden won the election and is not an outright white supremacist. That's it. Now, for me, for Jen, for Charlotte, for you, we would have to the equivalent is me walking on water. I have to be like the most special brown man on earth. I have to fly.
But what an amazing show would that be?
Yeah, that would be us if I flew.
Seriously.
But
wait, it's this show.
That just goes to show you, right? Even when I was on CNN, the type of stuff that Rick Santorum got away with casually because he was a Republican, he had to engage in a both sides reference. I got knocked for making Scott Jennings feel bad once. I got called up, right? So, true story. He whined and complained. And I just did an Intelligence Squared debate, which I think is coming out tomorrow. I'll openly say that the conservative who was on with me, Danielle Lepska from American Heritage, I don't know. But she did passive aggressive jabs at me throughout the entire hour. And at the end, I just pushed back. And then she told me to shut up. And then she said, as a woman, you can't talk to me. And then she canceled herself and left. So, and I think the reason was because they're not used to us pushing back. And they're not used to us actually hitting back. And I hit back so nicely that even the producer apologized to me afterwards. But it just goes to show you that every single institution bends the knee. And what's happening now and Jen's exactly right. Fascism gets normalized and comes in marginally when every single institution keeps treating it as a normal movement. And you have to have enough sections of our communities to stand up and say, no. But they keep bending the knee, which is why we're here, where a freaking Herschel Walker doesn't vomit and trip over himself on a debate stage, and he gets praised against Pastor Reverend Warnock.
Well, he had the badge, I mean, I think that was worth a couple of points. Speaking of Georgia, Warnock is now up 0.05% with 90% in.
Fulton County.
Yep, exactly. Fetterman is up 0.83 with 87% in. Quick question. I mean, it's not that important, but Johnson is up 3 against Barnes with 84%. And my humble opinion, I think it's because the Democrats picked the wrong candidate. Not that Barnes isn't a good guy and a good Democrat, but it's Wisconsin, and I don't necessarily think a Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren-backed candidate is going to do the job there. I'm a little curious. I mean, Lee is like killing McMullen. And Lee is one of the worst people on the planet. Like, he's up there with Ron Johnson, in my view. So that's kind of fascinating. Considering I think what the Democrats did, the very strategically smart thing of not running a candidate and backing McMullen, he was a Republican candidate for president, wasn't he, or something?
Yeah, he was, but it goes back to Jen's point. I think they're just choosing the Detroit Lions.
Yeah.
It's like, that's my team. and I know Mike Lee's terrible, but that's my team.
Yeah. It's
And they always have the turducken at halftime, so like we can forget about the bad playing.
Oh my! Can we talk about tennis? Like, if we're going to talk about sports, so can we talk about tennis at least, so I don't sound like a complete idiot? So I think we're gonna wrap up soon because I don't know how much more is gonna happen anytime.
Can I say
soon.
something real quick, Mary? Like,
yeah. I was
I'll be
gonna.
very quick with this. I've seen some of the folks in the chat ask who I am. Like, am I a journalist or something? So I want to get this out of the way because
she's Charlotte fucking Clymer.
The gut feeling I have is that a lot of you see a random trans woman on the panel and you're wondering like how I got here. So I really want to be clear about this. I'm a writer. I'm a communications consultant. I'm a political strategist. I was a press secretary at the Human Rights Campaign. I've been published in national op-eds everywhere. I have a very popular blog. My point is I'm very qualified to be here. I'm extremely qualified to be here because I know what I'm talking about. So you don't need to worry how I got here. I'm being polite and listening to everyone else, having a good conversation. But when you see someone on this panel, you shouldn't question why we're here. We're here for a good reason. Just wanted to put it out real quick to a couple of folks in the comments who seem to have forgotten their manners when a trans person appears where they don't believe a trans person should be. So
I don't need to be as polite as Charlotte is about this. You do not question the people. First of all, Charlotte is not a guest here. She is a nerd avenger. She is the core. She's part of the core of the show.
Yes.
Everybody here is eminently qualified, infinitely more qualified than the people questioning her qualifications. So again, this is our house. You are guests here. You play by our rules. If you are not interested in doing that, if you are not interested in being a decent human being, please just fuck off. We don't have time for you. Okay? And you know, I take it personally because I work very hard. We all work very hard, but I mean, it just in the context of the show to make sure that the people involved in the show are the most qualified, are the voices who most deserve to be amplified and listened to. So I just, Jesus fucking Christ, what are you doing? I mean, everything is at stake here. And it's voices like Charlotte's and Waj's and Jen's and Dahlia's and Norm's and on and on. I mean, think about who the Nerd Avengers are.
Yeah.
And you tell me where in the media you will find a more qualified, dedicated, intelligent, incisive group of people. You can't, because there is not one. We've got Danielle Moody. We've got Cliff Schecter, and I said Norm already. Dean Obeidallah, Adam Parkamenko. I mean, a lot of people who weren't here tonight who are our Nerd Avengers.
Dahlia, Norm.
I said, yeah, Dahlia, Norm. I said, now we said Norm 4 times. And we said Dahlia 3 times. But seriously, and then think
Jen.
Exactly. And then think about the
Mary, I need a publicist. I really like how this is sounding. Here,
good. Well, it's going to be recorded. But also think about our honorary Nerd Avengers. Think about the guests who come on to this show because of the quality of our core group of people. So never, ever, ever question us. That is not you can ask us questions. You can disagree with us. Disagree with us until the cows come home. You can never, ever question our motives and our qualifications. I'm so fucking sick of this. You know, if you want to question people and you want to, tear people down, go be a Republican.
That's right.
I want Mary to be in my beatdown crew because she likes just.
I am. Wait, I'm not. I thought I was. By the way, I know it doesn't really matter because it's virtual, but I it gives me a little bit of cachet. I have a second-degree black belt in Taekwondo, so.
I could tell. Because I'm like, that was done with so much chutzpah. I'm like in confidence, and I'm like, she probably yep Taekwondo. And also, folks, I googled Charlotte, and within 12 seconds, this is what I found out. In 2020, Charlotte Clymer was included in Fortune magazine's 40 Under 40. You're so young, it's gross.
I know. Stop it. Well, you will.
Politics category. So next, for the future reference, we're all Googleable in case someone is sincerely curious. And with Charlotte, I found a Wikipedia page within 12 seconds, and I read it, and I just shared you one of the many amazing tidbits.
Thank you,
but
Mary.
it's
I appreciate
an
that.
amazing group that Mary has brought together. In the past several months, I've been very honored to be included in the group. And then when I sit there and I look at this Brady Bunch screen, sometimes like I did earlier tonight, it's really remarkable. I was sitting there right when I got on. There was, Jen Rubin, who I disagreed with on like 95% of things 15 years ago because she was one of those neocons. But in defense of democracy, she's really come around. And then you got Norm, who is at the AEI Conservative Institute, and he's been ringing alarms about the lurch of right-wing republicanism before anyone else. Him and Thomas Mann came out with a great book. There's Charlotte, there's Danielle, there's Jen, there's Cliff, there's me. The Dean comes in and pops in. Kurt pops in once in a while. I'm sitting there, I'm like,
John Fugelsang.
John, Vindman, Rachel, right? And look at what's happened with her.
Rachel and Alex.
Yeah, look what they've gone through and the transformation that they've gone through. I think it's just a really amazing collection of voices, diverse voices, people who don't agree on everything, but agree that this country should be a multiracial democracy that should stretch and expand itself to include all of us, children of immigrants, trans, Muslims, women, Jews, and we're willing to come together and fight. And the difference between us and I think others, many of our colleagues, and I'll reveal to you, because I talk to them and they're our friends, who are on CNN and MSNBC, who care and are in government, they don't have the license to say what we can say. Right. And so to get to this point where we can channel, I think, people's hope and frustration, we're lucky. And so I appreciate, and I read all the comments all the time. I try to, I wish there was a comment section. I would respond to you guys. And I try my best to follow in when I get the conch. I try to respond to what you're saying. I follow along with the comments. So thank you for joining us as well. It always gives me hope that there's people who care. On midnight, 12:35 a.m. on a friggin' Wednesday morning, here we are talking like nerds about democracy.
Yeah, and
that's all.
Charlotte, thank you for flagging that, because I have to pay attention to so many other things that I don't always get to look at the comments of.
Mary, I'm so sorry. I don't usually do that, but
why are you
it's
sorry?
been a long
No.
year. It's been stressful, and I just thought, no, I've been working hard all year for tonight. I'm not going to let this just slide.
There is no apologizing. Okay. That is the kind of thing we need to know, because you know what? That's divisive. Those kinds of comments are divisive, and we need to make it very clear that we are united. We are a united front, and there is nothing but respect and admiration here, as far as I'm concerned. And anybody, that
I'm just kidding.
It's a different.
Brian knows we joke.
Different story. No, I know. In fact, I think it's one of people's favorite things to comment about is they're like, "Do you like him or does he just annoy you?" Like, can it be both?
We love him.
No, but seriously, we do. He's like the older brother I never had, even though I have an older brother. So it's important to call these things out, because it just people, they don't do this on the right. They give permission to be their worst selves. We're not doing that. We are not doing that. We need everybody pulling together. So
can I just say something that might be really rude?
No, pulling together.
Oh no, this is.
I'm only kidding. I'm kidding.
You.
I'm kidding.
I was looking at the results about Carrie Lake, and I was thinking, a really good meme would be your vac thing, which was vacuuming that little piece of carpet because your uncle was coming by, of her like vacuuming like in the campaign event party, because she just gave a speech basically saying she'll never concede, essentially. Photoshop her like vacuuming up the the detritus from the. Okay, I thought it was funnier in my brain. Okay.
Oh, by the way, I think it was Simon flagged that Mastriano wasn't conceding, and he lost by like 30 points. Like, go ahead. And I just want to make something very, very clear. And then I kind of want everybody to make their closing comment. In an election, in a free and fair election, when the winner is called, it doesn't fucking matter if the loser concedes or not. Right? Donald never conceded. Who cares? Joe Biden is our president and Donald is a big fucking loser. And not conceding, especially when it's so decisive, just makes you look like a baby. And I don't mean to insult babies, so I probably shouldn't say. Just makes you look like a
Speaking
total.
of some of the updates in the comments, some positive ones. Someone pointed out that California, the pro-abortion initiative, passed, and it looks like not that. It was also Vermont. We know Kentucky lost, which was the one that was anti-choice, and Michigan appears to be on track to win. This is also good.
Yeah, listen, there are.
Let's see what happens in Nevada. That's close.
And a lot of the I can't remember what they're called because I'm tired, but the referenda or whatever a lot of those were important and a lot of them seem to be passing. So that is very hopeful. And okay, so we're gonna end. So Jen, any last thoughts, comments, what have you?
Usually it's around this time of night, at least last, it was 2 years ago and 2 years before that. So 2018 midterms and last election, where is now that I was starting to panic because things were suddenly turning against us. And I was like, I was on the phone, I think with Jen Rubin last time, and her son was doing all the numbers and I had my little charts and we were like, there's still hope. And now we're kind of like in a much, knock wood, in a much better spot. It's not panic. So I'm just hoping to go to sleep and wake up a week from now. No, I mean, I don't mean wake up a week from now, but then, a week from now, we'll know a lot more and we'll be much more confident about the results. But I'm feeling like I don't see a red wave. Like I see like
there's it's not even possible anymore.
Yeah. And, I think the Democrats, not only did we exceed expectations for this election, but based on everything we said, this was a midterm. Usually the party in power loses seats. We have a major recession. We have gas prices being manipulated. We have et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Saudi Arabia.
Right. I mean, we have all this misinformation, and yet still we may actually hold the Senate, and they may have a very small margin in the House where all they can do is act like fools and get nothing done. So that seems like okay. And then we just work on building the multiracial democracy that we all deserve, where we have a better planet. We have freedom to be who we are, freedom to enjoy the land that we live in without it being exploited just for profit. There's a lot we can all dream about together because we were not completely destroyed tonight. So that makes me feel so much better.
Yes, absolutely. Charlotte?
Honestly, I think Jen summarized everything perfectly there. They threw the kitchen sink at us, and we've had a pretty damn good night, all things considered. We could very well wake up tomorrow, probably not tomorrow, but at least this week, we'll see Democrats holding control of the Senate, which is extraordinary in my humble opinion. So yeah, Jen said it perfectly.
Great. Waj?
The fight, like I said, begins tomorrow. They're not going to stop. You're going to see that happen in Georgia. You're going to see it happen in Nevada, also in Arizona. You're all seeing with Kerry Lake. They're going to further radicalize and weaponize, which means the next couple of years, especially leading up to 2024, are going to be tough in America. Because even if Democrats hold on to the Senate, which, like Charlotte said, is going to be amazing, and it seems likely, or at least a split, we're going to have election deniers, ladies and gentlemen. Republican election deniers who won the election, people who promote the big lie, QAnon, violence against election workers, poll workers, Democrats, people who made jokes about Paul Pelosi and was being killed. People are perfectly fine coming with guns to intimidate voters. People who are fine with intimidating law enforcement. Violence against law enforcement has gone up ever since Donald, who, yes, stole classified documents from the White House and no one is talking about it. He then promoted conspiracy theories against law enforcement, and a friggin' nut tried to attack the FBI office in Ohio and was shot and killed. We just forgot about that, but I digress. I say this to balance everything. I'm an optimist, as you know, but I'm also a pragmatist. You can't rest on your laurels, and you can't be apathetic. This is going to be a long-term fight. They're not going to give up. It's a radicalized, weaponized movement, and you're going to see them further radicalized leading up to 2024. The positive here is that if they get so radical. And this is what maybe if this election is a bellwether for what's about to happen in the next 2 years. We've seen that enough Americans are terrified by how radical the Republicans have become, especially on abortion, and especially when it comes to sanctioning violence and a coup. I believe the Republican Supreme Court will double down because they feel like this is their moment.
Yeah.
And I think they're going to go all out with what they can in the next 2 years, my prediction. As such, I think Republicans are overplaying their hand. This is where the optimist in me comes in. They think the majority will sit there and take it. I don't think they will.
Right.
They might go after marriage equality, affirmative action. They're going to gut climate change, or just all of it, right? So leading up to 2024, we have to organize now. And I believe with Fetterman's potential win in places in Ohio where they picked up a seat, right? There are some Trump voters, ladies and gentlemen, that you can swing and you can win them over, in my opinion. Some of the swing voters and independents are some people who voted for Trump. And if you build that multiracial coalition, I think 2024, inshallah, if we can survive the next 2 years, Democrats, I believe, can win the White House. I believe they can retake the House. I believe they can hopefully win in bigger margin in the Senate. And you can actually have the vision of America in 2024 and beyond. That's what I want you to hope for. That's what I want you to think about, but we have to fight for it.
Yeah. And I just want to say quickly that the margins, Fetterman's margin and Warnock's margins have increased slightly since last we checked. So that's good. It's a good trend. Suggests that the final votes are coming from Democratic strongholds, which is always a good thing. This has been extraordinary. Honestly, I've been quite anxious about tonight, and it may not be what we hoped, but what I do know is that it will be something we can work with. And what I promise to all of you is that going forward, this forum is going to be all about doing everything we can to make sure that the Democratic Party represents all of its constituents in the way that is necessary if we want to have democracy. Because, this country's never been one. And the only way it will be is if the only party that believes in democracy represents all of its people in a way that fully acknowledges their worth and dignity. So again, that's why some comments we will not let slide. We will call out people who fail to do that here, and you will not be welcome back.
And Mary, can we just quickly give you some plaudits? I mean, everything you've done this year, not just this show, which is big enough, but just all the money you've raised for Democrats across the board, y'all. She has her own organization. But then aside from that, she's on several different boards and organizations that also raise money for Democrats. So Mary, thank you for everything you've done this year.
Well, I could not have done it without all of you. Seriously, I mean, I'm not really sure what this year would have been like without you guys. Not just the amazing guests we have and our honorary Nerd Avengers, but mostly my core Nerd Avengers. You guys mean so much to me, and my goal for the next couple of years and going forward is for this group to become a force, because I think that's what needs to happen. I honestly do. So we're gonna end it there.
Because Mary's not gonna say it. Mary's Nerd Avengers is coming to LA for its first show in 6 weeks, ladies and gentlemen. January, I think 19th.
No, it's December 19th.
December 19th. Oh yeah, and I'm gonna be there.
And we're gonna give you the wrong date.
Yeah. So it's the first of hopefully many. And Mary's taking it on the road, and Jen and I are gonna do our best to support and help out and be entertaining and nerd.
I'm already studying all the trivia, by the way.
No, it will definitely be the first of many, and hopefully, I'm almost certain we're going to be in DC the second week in January. So hopefully, Charlotte will be our local Nerd Avenger at that one. But we're going to keep you posted with all those dates. But yes, the very first Mary Trump Show Nerd Avenger extravaganza will be in Los Angeles on December 19th. We'll keep you posted about that. I think tickets are going to go on sale next week. I'm not sure, but again,
I'm going to try to come to that, by the way.
Sorry?
I'm going to try to come to that.
Oh, that would be awesome, because trust me, we will have fun after the show is over. Anyway, so for tonight, thank you to Mara Gay, Julie Zebrak, Jennifer Rubin, Dahlia Lithwick, Dean Obeidallah, John Fugelsang, Norm Ornstein, Cliff Schecter. Look at this group of people. My God. Brian Karem, Rachel and Alex Vindman. I love it when I mispronounce people's names. It's awesome. But we're all really tired. Jen Taub, Charlie Clymer, Wajahat Ali. Thank you. I love you guys. And we'll check in tomorrow for sure. And thanks to everybody else watching and hanging with us and giving us comments that we didn't need to reprimand you for.
Thanks all. Take care.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks.